Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and you're all getting treated once again to some lovely, lovely slop, because you're all a bunch of little piggies. And if you're a little piggy that loves clown decade slop, do subscribe to this channel and of course become a channel member, right? Obviously, for those of you that have been around this channel since at least last December, you'll know that I made an hour-and-a-half video saying that Connor Tomlinson is just the worst, and it's not particularly hard to find for those of you who are wondering what that video entailed. Literally just type in Tomlinson worst and it will come up in the old search, and I effectively call him a chimp for an hour and a half, telling him that he makes basically every mistake I think I would make if I wanted basically the entire planet to hate me. And either Connor Tomlinson has not seen the video, or he has seen the video and decided to take none of the lessons on board because he decided to go on to the Lotus Eaters and basically make every mistake again. So it's a half-hour Lotus Eater segment, as usual. For some reason, because I hate myself, I think I'm going to go through basically the whole thing, cut out any waffle, and you're going to enjoy me laughing at someone else for 2 hours again, which a lot of people seem to like, so why not deliver it again? Right, here we go.
It's been about a week since Rupert Lowe proposed a pact between Restore Britain and Reform UK, and, well, it's not going very well.
Yeah, I mean, it was designed never to go well. Everyone wanted it not to go well. And while it's still up, audience, you may as well watch the last Laughing at the Guardian, because we go through the Lotus Eaters coverage of Farage versus Lowe, and without Reform really even saying anything, they basically concede on every point and basically say, yeah, we're quite happy with where Reform are, without really realising that's where Reform are, because Lotus Eaters have managed to get themselves into this bubble of effectively unironically thinking that Reform are to the left of Andy Burnham, because they don't concentrate or anything or look at any of their policies. And so they don't realise that indefinite leave to remain, which is quite a large reason we have a lot of legal migrants in the UK, is being rescinded by Reform, whereas Rupert Lowe is pretty consistent in saying he doesn't want that rescinded.
And it's mainly due to the malfeasance of the Telegraph crashing out over the course of about the last 4 or 5 days.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, they're only largely crashing out over what I've been crashing out over for the past, frankly, 2 years. Because all you really have to do is listen to someone like Charlie Downs or, well, take your pick of any other large Restore backing account on Twitter, and it is normie voter kryptonite. Which did beg the question for a few people, why only now have they put out this information that's months old? And I think the answer is because of the Manchester elections, where they've started outperforming the Tories, and they've thought, right, now it's about time to go a bit nuclear on all this, and actually inform people of what characters who officially work for the party are like, or who don't officially work for the party, are very, very influential members. Which, by the way, is actually part of what the media is supposed to do, and exactly what Lotus Munchers do anyway, so I'm not sure what their complaint is there.
It does seem to be a proper hissy fit.
Yeah, there's just a non-stop diatribe of attack pieces on Restore Britain that are getting increasingly unhinged.
I don't think the vast majority of them are unhinged. I think a lot of them are just pointing out things I had already pointed out, but who listens to me? I'm some guy with 11,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I was happy when some people at Talk started pointing this stuff out, but obviously it's gone a fair way down the road before the mainstream have actually started pointing these things out, which again, they're supposed to point things out like this. That's the point. Oh, they're calling us names like racist and anti-Semitic, and it's like, I thought you guys were supposed to think racism and anti-Semitism were based. Why are you complaining about this now? Because at the end of the day, these people all know that electoral politics is about not seeming like total bigoted weirdos, but they all act like total bigoted weirdos all of the time, and then complain when people point out they act like total bigoted weirdos. Rather than, you know, the thing that Rupert Lowe apparently always says, which is you're supposed to not care. They all care. They all care very deeply, because at the end of the day, nobody likes being put on the Telegraph to effectively be told you're a nasty person. And they do actually care about that, because at the end of the day, people don't want to be told they're bad people.
As an update, this happened a couple of days ago. The Telegraph decided to quote an anonymous Reform spokesperson who said, "We will have no collaboration with Restore Britain as long as Charlie Downs, co-founder, lead spokesman, mogging them to death in that photo they took of him back when they were profiling him as a young Reform supporter. So this was actually just in the Telegraph's archives, funnily enough.
You can really tell with the Zoomer often that they are desperate to try and reflect the sort of clavicular Nick Fuentes reputation that those people have actually garnered. I mean, I suppose at the very least Charlie Downs can mog people because he's not ugly and does clearly lift. However, if your defence of him starts off with saying this, I'm just going to assume you're quite cringe. And yes, Charlie Downs was a Reform supporter until he realised he couldn't get a job with them because they thought he was a bit useless, and so switched tack to anywhere he could get a politics job, which is being paid a lot more than the medium wage, I will say, to do... I'm not even sure what he does for Restore anymore. He's supposed to be campaigns director. As far as I can tell, he's barely out actually door knocking, he's barely out actually campaigning. He seems to just go on to Talk TV or something like that once every sort of few months, and then he literally just disappears and tweets once or twice. I have no idea what he does as a campaigns director. Especially since, certainly in Makerfield, they brought in Scott Benton, the ex-Tory MP, to run the campaign there. So again, I have no idea what he actually does. And even Catherine Blakelock, when she went on Richie and Rogue to be interviewed, even she was saying she doesn't really know what the Zoomers do. At least once every 6 months you see Lewis Blackpool come out with an FOI request that came back and he reports on it. Charlie Downs, though, literally no idea.
We won't actually work with them until Charlie Downs is sacked.
That would be one of my red lines too, yeah. Well played, Reform. I mean, the other side of the coin of this is that, yes, they know that Rupert Lowe won't sack Charlie Downs, and so it's effectively a way to say, well, we're not going to do this then. But it's a lot easier to say, on the return bluff, oh, well, we won't work with you if this one guy that we have evidence of being just an absolute weirdo is gone. And, you put that out to Normieverse, and it's like, well, yeah, the principles are fine, but, your personnel are absolute crazies. Can we get rid of some of them, please? And you say no to that, and it's like, so you're not going to get rid of one or two people to unite the right? What's wrong with you? That obviously is a much better scenario to be in than what Rupert Lowe and the Restorers are trying to say, which is, oh, Reform have absolutely no interest in working with you, because quite clearly this isn't true, at least from what's publicly being said.
Now, I spoke to a source within Reform who was fairly senior, and they were keen to stress that quote in this article here did not come from Reform's press office, and they thought they had a mole within the camp trying to sabotage any accord between Restore and Reform.
Yeah, see, this is why I don't really bother listening to Lotus Eaters or Connor. I just listen to Times Radio, Telegraph, podcasts, whatever, who actually do talk to senior Reform politicians, and basically all of them say, yeah, we never actually expected this to go anywhere. And this has effectively been thrown out so that we get, headlines like this. I also happen to know that I know for a fact that there are people pretending to be Reform sources who feed fake information to Connor. I will just say that as well. Because the thing is with the Zoomer often, they'll say, oh, I talk to relatively senior people. Most of the time, that's not true, and they just say that to effectively make their source seem way more trustworthy. In reality, he's just done what the Telegraph did and he complained about. Oh, this is an anonymous source, implying you can't trust it. Well, all Connor's done is cited an anonymous source. So they're about as trustworthy as each other as far as I care. In fact, no, the Telegraph's slightly more trustworthy because I know Connor lies.
So it sounded for a little while like they were like, well, this isn't on us. We haven't made such a demand.
The thing is, though, it's actually quite, if it is true, it is quite a complimentary claim, because what they're basically saying is that, Rupert was saying he doesn't want any ex-Tory ministers, and there's 13 of them.
Which, I've got to be absolutely honest with you, considering that there's probably about 500 Tory ministers still alive to this day, taking on a baker's dozen is hardly filling the damn thing with Tories, is it? Especially considering that, one, most of those ex-Tory ministers aren't even MPs, and probably aren't going to be MPs. And secondly, there's clearly absolutely no route for them to become ministers anyway. They're there for advisory jobs and to promote reform whenever they're doing media rounds, and that's about it. Because the Lotus Eaters are going to find this quite hard to believe. I would estimate that actually most of them, not Danny Kruger obviously, but most of them actually do hate the Tories more than the people at the Lotus Eaters, because there'll be personal reasons for it.
And there's one Charlie, so they're basically setting the exchange rate of Tory ministers to based Zoomers as being 13-1.
Yeah, again, in the Laughing at the Guardian stream where we went through an hour and a half of Dan and Carl, they conceded on the Tory ministers thing, by the way. They're like, yeah, we get that you'll probably need some experience, so, he doesn't believe this. Or he's just forgotten he said it the other day.
What I thought was quite conspicuous as well is, up until this point, what has Nigel Farage said about his conditions for working with Rupert Lowe? He's kept the door open despite some bickering over who should call who, like they're teenage girls.
Let's not pretend that it was exclusively Rupert Lowe in the wrong. Let's be fair here. Nigel Farage, yes, I reached out to him. Rupert Lowe, this is a lie. Here is our text conversation where I didn't say anything back and went straight to the media to call him a narcissistic liar. Sorry, who is the mean girl in this situation? Because it ain't Farage, who's, bothering to try and actually work his party into government, for goodness sake.
But he said, I'm not going to kick out Suella Braverman. Okay, so the failed Tory ministers they didn't name, but Rupert did name in his post, were Nadim Zahawi and Nadine Dorries.
They're the only two you want kicked out. They're not even doing anything. Literally, I mean that. They're not doing anything. All they do is go on Twitter and have a go at Tories every now and then. That's pretty much all they do. We refuse to work with you because Nadine Dorries and Nadim Zahawi are counter-signalling Tories, and that's the extent of what their job is in reform. Thanks for that. I mean, really, there are people who are going to be looking at this period of time to the right and effectively think, why the hell did we crash out so much? And I think I'm going to be totally vindicated again on all this, because I've been vindicated on everything so far. But I am also very aware that is very hubristic, so, let's not say anything too crazy.
Obviously you don't want them in.
And I have it on good authority that they're not exactly the most popular among some of Reform's leadership either, and they would quite like for them to leave of their own accord and save them the embarrassment.
Well, yeah, there's obviously people who never wanted them in. I still cannot understand why Nadim Zahawi was in there. Nadine Dorries, I can sort of understand. Reform wanted her because she was on a book tour, and oh my god, good publicity for Reform every time she's on a chat show, blah blah blah. But again, neither of them are particularly damaging Reform at this point. The most damaging was the announcement of both of them, and as far as I care, neither of them have done any particular damage since, and if anything have only helped, even if the help is insofar as I'm pretty sure most people forgot they were in there, because again, they're not doing anything. So who cares?
Right, so okay, that can be negotiated.
Yes.
Again, I'd like to point out, in the video last Friday with Dan and Carl, they negotiated themselves into the position of, the only thing we really care about is getting rid of a load of migrants. That's effectively what they conceded into, which Reform are doing anyway. So again, none of this is true. This is all either, they're so misinformed on what Reform is actually pushing policy on, or they're just so incompetent at their job that all they really want to do is just make eternal drama about this. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a good content farm for me too, but goodness me, this is going to get boring very quickly. I'm still finding it entertaining, luckily, but my god. There's only so many times I can say the Lotus Munchers don't appear to know what's going on before it does get incredibly boring.
And if you notice, despite our misgivings about Farage's previous inconsistent statements on demographic security...
Goodness me, imagine being the leader of a political party and not wanting to have the entire media come down like a ton of bricks on you. I mean, seriously, they've gone on about the Telegraph making all these hit pieces on Restore for effectively doing what they want Farage to say, and they wonder why Farage is inconsistent, quote-unquote, on it, despite the fact that, wow, the man thinks Enoch Powell was right.
He didn't counter-signal Rupert on demographic security. He didn't mention it, but he didn't say it was beyond the pale.
Yeah, in fact, effectively they said negotiations can go on if you get rid of Charlie Downs and some other people. I think Steve Laws is the one they were implying. Which, honestly, if your red line is no, we're keeping Steve Laws, that's just insane. All Steve Laws really does is get you a lot of attention from America, but at the end of the day, this is all Restore has actually been about. It's been about getting a lot of American attention, and therefore siphoning a lot of money into it, and they just have to keep looking like they're doing things. I'm genuinely of the opinion that they don't care if they never win an election. All this is about is making Rupert Lowe and Alistair Harrison a lot of money, while the Zoomer Waffen who work for them end up working on jobs with salaries they would never ever get if they were actually thrown into the private sector. Basically, the whole thing's a nepotistic friend group that circle jerks each other while Rupert makes it rain over them. Which I wouldn't particularly mind if they weren't trying their best to ankle-bite Reform to the point where it could cost them an election. Again, I want to get it out of a lot of people's heads. None of these people particularly care about Britain, and if the worst did come to worst, they'd all just move off to America. Because ultimately that is the dream here. Move over to American and be the British Nick Fuentes.
And then Farage came out and said at the press conference that we need to sack Charlie Downs.
Yeah, thank God for that. People at Reform have a brain. Probably why I'm still a member.
And he was saying, I've been fighting the far right for all of my life.
Which is completely true. Loads of people on the far right today still complain that he shows off that he killed the BNP. Again, Nigel Farage is the most successful politician that we've seen in the 21st century in Britain. It's not even a competition. We're within touching distance of destroying the Uniparty. You're doing everything you can to stop it because you have literally no idea what your countrymen think. Even my mum has said before she even knew what Restore was. She didn't name Charlie Downs because she couldn't remember his name, but she has mentioned, God, that the young people who go on GB News are just terrible. And I'm like, what do you mean, that Charlie fella? And effectively she says, yeah, I think that's his name. So granted it could have been Connor as well, but no, I'm pretty sure she was talking about Charlie Downs. So even my normie mum, who watches GB News sometimes, has seen Charlie Downs and just thought, no. Whereas at the same time, she's sort of, I'm iffy on Farage, which is a hell of a lot better than God no.
And this was frustrating and disappointing. Because yet again, hasn't learned that they are laying the trap for Restore Britain so that you can also step in it. Because these are the exact accusations that Farage was facing in November of last year when they pulled out some random ex-classmate who claimed he was making Holocaust jokes.
It's amazing they still try and make this point. That the problem is, yeah, accusations will be made. They don't stick if there's nothing actually backing it up to make it stick. Oh, Farage said anti-Semitic jokes when he was young. One, nobody cares. And two, the evidence on that was basically not there. In fact, the best they had was trying to get some teacher out who taught Farage to basically have a go at him. And again, nobody cared. Whereas when it's Charlie Downs effectively insinuating that Nigel Farage is brought off by Jews, when we have a literal clip of him saying that Jewish people aren't British because they don't believe in Christ, and he has an issue with that, and even Dan Wootton has to say, God, I don't agree with that, that's making me uncomfortable. There's a lot more there that is going to stick, and it also really doesn't help that Charlie Downs' reaction to that isn't like Farage, who says, what a ridiculous accusation, what are you talking about? Instead, it's effectively to crash out and say he's a victim of the establishment. Which again, isn't quite the tone that Farage actually takes when it comes to the personal accusations. The first thing he'll say is that this is ridiculous and obviously not true. He'll then go on about the media attacking him when it's direct threats such as publishing pictures of his houses and journalists turning up at his daughter's door. That's when he starts saying the establishment is after him. Or when the NCA are leaking that he got £5 million to the media that is illegal to leak. So this is another problem with the Zoomerwaffen. They just have absolutely zero idea whatsoever of how the media actually partakes in its tactics. I mean, when the Telegraph says something X, Y, or Z is racist or anti-Semitic, 9 times out of 10 they're actually correct. And they are correct about Charlie Downs, which is why even off the top of my head I have a few examples of him being exactly that. Let's not forget he calls the simple act of borrowing money for a very low interest rate usury, and there's only one reason to do that.
Yes. So Farage himself was fending off all of these spurious accusations just short of a year ago, and is now giving them extra life and they will be used against him.
He doesn't care, he's not an anti-Semite. Like, he literally doesn't care, he knows he's going to get that, and none of it sticks, and there's no way to make it stick. In fact, what this tactic is saying, this is an actual example of anti-Semites that people were trying to tell me I was like, and you can see a clear difference between me and Charlie Downs. If anything, it's protecting him from further accusations of anti-Semitism, because what this actually is Connor Tomlinson trying to protect his friend Charlie Downs and effectively keep him employed. Because if Charlie Downs is kept employed, then Connor Tomlinson is kept employed by writing silly papers for Restore Britain that they don't actually ever publish. He obviously wants to make money from it, and he basically admitted that in his first stream on Restore Britain. I think he's also pretty annoyed because for a couple of weeks he was trying to tweet out Restore Britain are sort of at the end of their rope, they're not actually doing very well, and maybe we need to start thinking about going back to Reform. Well, Reform have effectively unequivocally said no Zoomerwaffen, please. And now he's sort of stuck in this, well, no man's land of not being hired by Restore Britain, but also not actually being able to make it anywhere else. I mean, I may as well throw it out there. A source close to Connor Tomlinson at the time actually did tell me the reason he left the Lotus Eaters, because he used to be employed by them, is because he basically thought all of them were below him and stupid. which I'm going to be honest with you, not a million miles away from the truth. However, he went out, tried to make his own way in the world, tried to get hired by a load of people. What's ended up happening is everyone knows what he's like, because effectively my video turned out to be accurate from Christmas, and now he's had to fall back on, oh, I'll go on the Lotus Eaters whenever I can, and stream 3 or 4 times a week, 3 or 4 hours at a time, because I get a load of super chats from it, and that's effectively how he's having to fund his twins that are currently being gestated in his wife, which, I can't knock a guy for trying to earn a living for his kids. But at the same time, it is getting really, really irritating that I'm watching this guy grow up in his 20s and effectively act like he's never grown up from the age of 14. But at the end of the day, this is what a lot of Zoomers online are actually like. They just don't grow up. And I think it's because Twitter really, really does arrest your development and keep you in the mindset of high school. At this point, I would like to very much thank my girlfriend for dragging me out of that kicking and screaming. Don't get me wrong, we enjoy our online drama, but my God, there's more important things in the world.
And as well, if you jump with 2 feet into this bear trap, it will close around you, and the people setting the trap just want you to form an alliance with the Conservatives.
I don't want to go too off topic, but actually listening to the Telegraph's podcast on their Unite the Right article, they do actually say it's actually the Tories that are completely in the wrong, and they're probably going to have to make a hell of a lot of concessions to reform. And if there is going to be a merger, it's going to be Tories merging into Reform rather than the other way round. So I actually think that their objectives are a hell of a lot more earnest than a lot of people online are saying. I think they genuinely do want a united right, and I don't think they're too bothered if it's within the Tories or Reform. And obviously, they obviously earnestly hate anti-Semitism and racism. That's just obvious. And so people have been basing this all off headlines, but actually, I've bothered to read beyond it and listen beyond it, and I think they're a hell of a lot more earnest than a lot of people online are saying. And either way, I don't think it's happening anyway, so I don't really care.
That's why they want to clear Restore Britain out the way. Alistair Heath has been saying as such in his articles and his GB News appearances.
I mean, I'd much prefer it if you could show that. And if that is Alistair Heath's opinion, and he has actually said that, fair enough. But when it comes to the wider Telegraph, that doesn't seem to be the opinion. Certainly not Camilla Tominley's and Poppy Coburn's anyway, who are both remarkably sympathetic about reform. Poppy Coburn much more so.
So it's annoying that they fell for this.
At no point is there actually a denial that Charlie Downs is anti-Semitic, by the way. At no point do they do what Farage does, which is these are ridiculous accusations. And they don't even go into details of it. By the way, the only reason for that is because, 1, Connor Tomlinson's a moron, and 2, Connor Tomlinson wants to talk about himself and his drama with Alex Phillips. But more to the point, what did they actually fall for? I actually have talked to people in Reform HQ now. They know how mental Charlie Downs types are. They know about Steve Laws. They've known about this for ages. All this is springing the trap at the same time as other media outlets, and they just so happen to do it at the same time as the Telegraph. Now, that's either because they're working with the Telegraph, or I think much more likely, Farage is just answering questions, and part of the answer of would you work with Restore is not if they're keeping the anti-Semitic and racist types around, because we don't want to be a part of that. Which actually is the bear trap right around Restore at this point. Again, I think the inertia's too much at this point to actually see a massive dip in polling, but I think over time, especially with people getting bored of not winning anything, I think the thing's going to die out eventually. They keep paying literally hundreds of thousands for billboards, for leaflets, for what have you, but you're seeing way less of the whole, oh my god, look at the literal thousands of people turning up to canvass. I've not seen that since Makerfield, and there's been plenty of by-elections to do it in since.
So, then Richard Tice came out and said the obvious. He was on Kevin O'Sullivan's show on Talk TV, and you can always count on Richard Tice to make a situation worse.
Is this just where he says that King Charles is a white Briton? Is this that clip?
He decides to say this, and I'm just going to play the clip.
Said on your station and elsewhere by the co-founder goes way beyond testing the boundaries, and we will have nothing to do with anybody who demonstrates such anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic attitudes and comments. Nothing at all.
Once again, seems reasonable, and once again, I do want it pointed out, the Lotus Eaters at no point try and say that these are ridiculous accusations, or that it's unfounded, or that it's untrue, and neither did they go through any of the evidence which they actually had in the very article they put up before. The whole assumption, if you watch Lotus Eaters, obviously is that these are ridiculous comments, but you do actually have to say that, even to your audience, Because people like me are going to come along and point out they're not actually denying any of this, by the way.
It's a massive, massive red line, wall, mountain.
Let's not talk about which wall, of course.
No, I get it's a joke, but this isn't really helping the situation, is it? Again, it's all subtext that these accusations are ridiculous. But much like Nigel Farage does all the time, he says it's ridiculous and then goes into why. Oh, this is ridiculous, I never said that at school. Oh, this is ridiculous, I was 16 at the time. This is ridiculous. The Breaking Point poster is actually making a very salient point, which 10 years later turns out, yes, that's actually true. What the Lotus Munchers do, they make a joke that is going to effectively be used once again in a Telegraph article to say they're anti-Semitic. I hope that was worth the wry smiles of people who are behind screens watching you, Mr. Tomlinson. And again, I'm not even bothered about the joke. I just don't think it was particularly good, and I don't think he did it from an anti-Semitic place. But if you're up against enemies who you think are going to be very dishonest about you, I'd be just not making these jokes whatsoever. But if I was trying to win elections, that is. But this is what you've got to bear in mind. They're not trying to win elections. They're trying to make careers. So bear that in mind.
Bear in mind, at the moment, Richard Tice is currently being investigated for a breach of parliamentary standards because he took an undeclared paid trip to Israel while speaking supportively about Israel.
Okay, it's also worth remembering that Connor Tomlinson was also paid to go to Israel. Basically, his entire follower base effectively called him a paid Israeli shill. And ever since then, he's been trying to claw back his, oh, I'm totally not completely on Israel's side, don't worry, bros, reputation. But I can't remember when Richard Tice went to Israel, and I can't remember when he was paid for it. He only has to do it if it was within the year of 2024 or late 2023. And it's probably quite likely he did it then. And so, yeah, he probably should have declared that, but, well, maybe they all need better lawyers if they're getting bad advice off them. Anyway.
Now, I don't think that means that he is supportive of Israel because he's being paid by Israel. I think he's just supportive of Israel and got a trip because he is supportive of Israel.
So why bring it up? The first implication of he took a paid trip to Israel is that he's being paid to say this. That's the implication. Why even say it if the first thing you're going to say is, I don't really mean that thing I was implying, even if it's accidentally. Again, I mentioned this in the big Connor Tomlinson video I did before. He'll say something to imply a bad thing, and then instantly say, oh, but I don't really mean that thing I implied. It's just inherently dishonest. Just don't even say it if you don't mean it. He also knows he can't say that because, again, he took a paid trip to Israel, so, take from that what you will.
But if
You're still getting paid by them.
He's at least getting in-kind contributions.
And the implication is still made by the end of it anyway. What was the point of any of that? Just call them a paid Zio shill if you want to, if that's all you mean. But Connor can't say that because it knows it'll cost him media time.
But if you wanted to acquit yourself of the charges that the Telegraph is saying that Charlie Downs has said about you, which he hasn't actually said, which is that you have been bought by the Israeli lobby.
No, it's the Millennial Woes tweet. Leftists will just pretend they don't understand the discourse, therefore making discourse impossible. It's the same thing here. What is the subtext? When Nigel Farage says, I can't be bought off by foreign powers, putting a picture of the Jewish Alliance of Reform, or whatever it's called, Reform Jewish Alliance. What's the implication there? And their defence is basically that of a leftist YouTuber saying, oh, actually, this was not actually directly and explicitly said, therefore we didn't say it. Sorry, that's not how this works. The implication's incredibly obvious. And beyond that, it's not just that one episode as to why people call Charlie Downs anti-Semitic. It's been fairly obvious, not just to me but a few other people, that Charlie Downs is actually quite on the anti-Semitic side for way over a year. Way over 2 years, in fact. Because unfortunately, none of you are actually as smart as you think you are, to quote Richard Spencer, and therefore none of you are actually anywhere near as sneaky or using dog whistles anywhere as close to effectively as you think. Everyone can read you like a book, and you're not a particularly compelling book either.
Then saying that not supporting Israel is our red line rather than demographic security, rather than anything to do with Britain's national interest, doesn't exactly acquit you.
Absolutely amazing. Richard Tice at no point said that either explicitly, and that wasn't even the subtext of what he was saying. It's just what most normal people in Britain think, which is not particularly fan of this anti-Semitism lark. Seems to be getting a few people stabbed, and plus my Jewish friends don't feel safe going out to city centres anymore. In fact, now that I think about it, I don't think anything that's been brought up by the Telegraph, at least from what I've read and seen, has had anything actually to do with Israel. The only one off the top of my head I can think that is even remotely to do with Israel is when Charlie Downs said that Gaza has been suffering a genocide at the hands of Israeli Jews, which is just hysterical leftist nonsense and effectively, as a lot of people say, a blood libel, effectively a way to encourage things like the stabbing at the Manchester synagogue. Things like that. I mean, that's the stochastic terrorism, which they're going to go into a bit later. In fact, I've just decided to have a quick look to see what they actually say about Charlie Downs when it comes to their summary. This newspaper report states Charlie Downs, co-founder of Lowe's Party, posted a disgusting image on social media which seems to imply that Nigel Farage has been bought by British Jews. So again, no one's saying that he has been bought by British Jews, they're saying it's heavily, heavily implied. So what the hell else can that imply? In fact, they don't even say British Jews, they say Israel. That's the implication, because British Jews aren't a foreign power. Elsewhere, he has said that the UK is defined by indigenous British ancestry and Christian faith, not even to mention the Dan Wootton clip. On social media on Thursday, he launched an appalling attack on Alistair Heath, the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, who had criticised Restore's racial and religious politics in a column for this newspaper, which again, explicitly, that is the point of Restore. They are supposed to be racial and religious. They're trying to be sectarian in favour of some white Christian nationalism. Oh, Haryan, how dare you call us white nationalists? What else am I supposed to call you? I thought the whole point of Restore is that white people should effectively act like Black Lives Matter, but, well, for White Lives Matter, I suppose. Miss Downs is not some fringe figure in Restore Britain. He's the party's campaign director, trading in anti-Semitic tropes on social media and calling journalists a traitor to the British people. It is disgraceful and unworthy of frontline politics. Don't worry, I agree with all this. I think it's very cringe too. Is it really Mr. Lowe's intention to be represented by an extremist and peddler of online hate? Mr. Lowe's refusal to condemn, let alone expel Mr. Downs, speaks volumes. Which is the odd part to me, because at the end of the day, I know Rupert Lowe's family are not particularly happy with the way Restore has been going, and they certainly don't like the reputational damage. But it does bring into question, like, what's going to happen with his businesses, what's going to happen with the membership of his clubs he's part of. You know, the attacks are relatively relentless from the Telegraph at the moment, and really they've been building up this portfolio to drop it now, and they've decided this is quite the right time. Effectively, because as I said in my video the other week, when Lowe first did his "oh, let's make a pact" video, it's showing weakness, so they've smelt blood and they've gone for it. That's actually why this is happening. They've been waiting for a time like this for ages, and they found Bush, kept pushing, and Restore is just going to stick its head in the sand and say, no, this is fine, we'll definitely still keep getting 7 to 8% in the Manchester area, and end up effectively taking out enough of the Reform vote, which, to be honest with you, come 2029, because I don't think there is going to be a snap election, are people's hands going to be on the stove enough where they're not doing silly things like voting for Restore Britain anymore? They'll have a little bit, but if you take a look over at Clacton, with Farage's decent result there, quite clearly there is still quite a love for Nigel Farage and Reform, albeit there was no alternative really to vote for there apart from a bin. But we know that there are people who dislike Farage to the point that they'll even vote for a bin. That's already been priced in, and so we just need the rest of the country to get on board with the Farage train, and that is partially less of the sleaze, and partially can we have some unified policy now. Whereas with Restore Britain, I don't see them getting above 10% at this point, which I suppose you can keep saying, oh, you know, you've really gone back here, Haryan, you've gone back here quite a bit. But I'm one, talking specifically about Manchester, and two, I think it's pretty obvious that even Restore are realising they're in a weak position. Anyway, let's carry on.
For me, I would rather we didn't talk about Israel at all. I would rather think about it as much as I do Mozambique.
That's fine, but off the top of my head, when it comes to Charlie Downs, you can say, I'd rather we didn't talk about Israel, but if you're going to go as far as to say it's a genocide, we are going to have to talk about why you said that. And again, the whole Farage saying he can't be bought off by anyone, and then the freaking Reformed Jewish Alliance. Which I think the funniest part of all that is that it was actually set up by a Catholic woman. But anyway, the implication being it's Israeli money. Again, I'd rather we don't talk about this. Well, I'm sorry, Charlie Downs genuinely seems to like talking about it, so you might be alone there, my dude.
But unfortunately, It seems to be the gravity well around which our entire domestic politics orbits, and so we just have to talk
Imagine.
Yeah, well, again, it's not just journalists, but a lot of these journalists will have Jewish friends who have basically told them they don't feel like they can go out to London or Manchester or something like that safely on Saturdays. And it all stems from a completely unjustified attack from Gazans on Israelis, which, by the way, people still deny even... Well, they don't deny it happened, but they deny it's unjustified. And to be honest with you, I can't even remember the last time I even heard or read up about Israel. They make it sound like it's a daily conversation. It's nowhere near that. But we have had a few incidents, some terror-related, that do directly have to do with it. So it's not particularly surprising we do talk about it from time to time.
You were walking down the street and you accidentally found yourself going through some interdimensional portal, and on the other side, they were absolutely obsessed with Peru.
Yeah.
If there were people from Peru being stabbed at their place of worship by, I don't know, Brazilians that Peru were at war with at the time, we probably would be talking about Peru quite a lot, yes. This is the idiocy of isolationist British nationalists. For some reason, they think it's very odd to talk about geopolitics. It's not odd at all. One, you have Firas there, who's a geopolitical expert. Two, we're in a global world. Of course we're talking about geopolitical events quite a lot. And people still talk about China and Russia, for goodness sake. Russia because it's invading Ukraine. China because it's got an economic vice on a lot of the rest of the world because of rare earth materials. Not just metals, I think it's materials these days. I mean, I guess sorry you can't just talk about how much you want the church gone to look really nice with a load of tulips. Sorry, but a lot of politics these days does actually involve talking about geopolitics. You know, why are our energy prices so high? Yes, one, because we won't drill the North Sea, but also because there's this crazy thing going on in Iran.
You'd be like, guys, why are we doing this?
Because it's causing issues here. If something going on in Peru was down the chain causing issues in Britain, we would be talking about it. This really shouldn't be shocking. I mean, seriously, are these people 12? Did these people stop developing their brains after the age of 12?
If your head isn't completely in, I've got to think about the Middle East all the time, to us it just looks weird.
The weirdest part here to me, honestly, is that they think that this is how people at the Telegraph generally think. Sorry, Israel is not talked about as much as you're making out here. It's not an everyday thing. The Telegraph talks about the Russian-Ukraine war more than it does Israel-Gaza. They still have a podcast going on the Russia-Ukraine war, by the way. So much so they have an entire channel dedicated to it, with over 1,100 podcasts. If they're obsessed with anything, it's Ukraine. And they also have another podcast that's going on about Iran. Did they have one about Israel-Gaza? No. They are obsessed with Ukraine. That's far, far, far more accurate. And beyond that, even when they do go on about Iran, it's mostly talking about Trump rather than Israel. So again, the obsession with Israel is completely unfounded. And I'm not being funny, but what's the subtext here? The subtext is any chat about Israel is weird, which I just don't agree with because there's major geopolitical events going on stemming from Israel. So sorry, it's actually a perfectly legitimate country to talk about. Fairly regularly as well, which again I don't even agree the Telegraph obsess with.
And it looks especially weird when they're saying, how dare you say that our party is run according to what benefits Israel? Or how dare you say that the Jewish people in our party have undue influence over you?
I mean, again, this isn't exactly helping their case, is it? At what point anywhere has anyone said you have to care about Israel? At no point has the Telegraph said this, and neither is it in the subtext. The subtext is, can you stop trying to justify the damn things that have caused people in Manchester to be stabbed and caused ambulances in London to be burned, and that have also encouraged 40,000 people or whatever it is to end up on the British terror watch list? Can you stop promoting this nonsense, please? Because effectively, again, the whole subtext of this is that the Telegraph is bought and paid for Jewish influence. Again, that's the implication here. And the implication that they care more about Israel than Britain, which again, I just completely and utterly reject. I don't think Camilla Tomley or Alistair Heath or whoever else at the Telegraph is doing what they're doing because they want to benefit Israel as much as they can at expense of Britain. I think they just think Israel are fairly justified in attacking Gaza because effectively they have a country that is effectively a missile silo just firing rockets constantly at Israel. And they were given a damn good reason to invade the damn place after October 7th. And that's basically as far as the thought process goes on Israel for an awful lot of people. It's just when it affects Brits as well and their friends and possibly even family, yeah, they tend to talk about it a little bit more and say, wow, this stuff's getting really bad and out of hand.
And it looks really weird when then there's a massive pile-on. Tice shared an article that we'll go over later, but whatever. Massive pile-on by the Jewish Chronicle saying, for the crime of not expelling Charlie Downs for allegedly making that accusation which he hasn't said.
Discourse impossible tweet, etc., etc.
The Jewish Chronicle then demands that Rupert Lowe be kicked off the parliamentary committee that the Conservatives appointed him to.
I mean, yeah, shocking. Another party that's pro-Israel is being lobbied to kick someone out who is not getting rid of his staffer and co-founder who is ideologically tied to having a go at Israel a fair bit. Or I'd just rather not talk about it, you know. Don't believe you. Just got to be honest with you.
So how dare you say that our politics and our party is run according to that which benefits Israel? For saying that, you need to be expelled from your parliamentary committee because you're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, but again, that's not the problem, though. No one has denied that, you know, Reform or the Tories or the Telegraph in general is pro-Israel. That's not where the issue comes in. The issue comes in is that you're implying they're only pro-Israel because effectively they're a paid and bought-for mouthpiece, which is obviously included in conspiracy theories that stem, well, if you want to go back to the 1930s, it goes even before that. But conspiracy theories that ended up with a rather nasty little event going on between 1942 and 1945. Now, obviously, I think it's fair to call that hyperbole, but at the same time, you know, it is still a sensitive subject for a fair few people. And the fact you're being willfully dishonest about what the actual issue is here, and what's actually being said by the Telegraph, really doesn't help your case, but there we go. It does have to be said as well, but I never find myself talking about Israel more than whenever I'm covering anyone on the dork right, or anyone on the radical left. It's these radicals that care more about Israel than anyone else. Everyone in the centre's just like, horrible war going on, but I get it. Oh my god, I wish Jewish people in Britain weren't having to be fearing for their lives. Which sometimes I hear about, oh, what about the white people being stabbed like Henry Novak? It's like, yeah, believe it or not, I can care about more than one thing at once.
It does sound like if you're suggesting that, you know, the Jewish network has a lot of power, if you're saying that, well, we will get you sacked from everything.
Yeah.
Again, they are incapable of helping themselves at all. And all these people are completely conspiracy-brained. You know, Dan doesn't believe the moon landings were real, so it's really not shocking that he's saying, here's some evidence that may help with my Jewish conspiracy. Guess it must be real. The problems with confirmation bias. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that Israel never lobby with other countries whatsoever. I'm saying every country does that. And Israel doesn't appear to do it any more than I see from other countries. I mean, I'll put it this way, Qatar and Saudi Arabia are very much invested into effectively buying off international sport. Qatar as well. You know, all the oil states in the Middle East, and, you know, that's buying an awful lot of influence in these areas. Whereas Israel are being barred from hosting any Eurovision Song Contest, and in fact, there is a lot of lobbying to get them even out of that and even competing. So let's be real here. As much as Israel do lobby, there's clearly a massive counter-lobby, and to think that Israel are unique in paying people off, let's say, even though Jewish conspirators vastly overestimate how many people are paid off by Israel, because obviously it happens. It's pretty ridiculous that it's only ever Israel that is accused of this, despite the fact that plenty of others are clearly brought off by other countries as well. Best example I can ever think of off the top of my head is Gary Lineker, who go on about human rights records of Britain and how he hates the Tories because slavery or something, who even knows. Then when it comes to hosting in Qatar, literally nothing said about it. Gary Neville as well. And again, why is that? Because they were paid to go there. Through the BBC, sure, but part of the contract is just don't say anything bad about Qatar. That's them literally being paid off for it. And again, I'm not saying Israel don't do this ever. I'm saying, one, it's not unique to Israel, and two, it happens nowhere near as much as anti-Semitic conspiracists say.
Which doesn't exactly acquit people of the charge. Yeah. And it also doesn't endear Jewish groups to the right-wing cause.
Right, so for a start, majority of the right-wingers in Britain are pro-Israel, even with the younger cohorts. So, good start there. Secondly, as much as Connor Tomlinson is trying to distance himself from this whole Jewish conspiracy nonsense, he's doing a really bad job when he basically says, oh, well, the stuff they're doing here doesn't exactly make me think that there isn't a conspiracy going on. Which, again, is going to put people off even having him back on any sort of talk TV or GB News show, because they're just not interested in that sort of thing. I mean, call it cancel culture if you want, but at the end of the day, Connor makes most of his money off his YouTube channel these days, so he doesn't really care, so he can get away with being edgy. He's being totally led around by his audience, who are a load of people who like him effectively because he orbits AA and that side of the online political arena.
So it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of... you're siding against the people that say, for example, I want to deport all the Muslims that happen to be stabbing Jews in Golders Green in Manchester.
No, Reform want to do that. Reform are pretty clear that they want to do that.
Which then, they go, well, why are you allying with them? You seem to be siding against us and allying with people that want to kill you. That's weird. And they go, see, you're accusing us of being your enemy. That's anti-Semitic. And you just follow the circle round and round and round.
I mean, aside from that all being nonsense, let's just be clear here. Charlie Downs effectively saying that there is a genocide going on in Gaza and implying that there is a Jewish conspiracy going on, that's actually far closer to the people who stabbed other people in Golders Green and Manchester than anyone in the right wing is. So let's just get that out of the way.
Now, how did we get here? How did this get sabotaged?
Well, that's a really easy one. You people are complete and utter fools who have no idea what a sensible political media strategy would actually look like if it hit you in the face. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what Reform have been trying to do for ages, and all you do is complain about it. So what do you do instead? Try and be the most based person on Twitter or the Lotus Munchers, and then get shocked when it turns out that the people who don't particularly appreciate that sort of political activism start pointing out to people that that sort of political activism is what they're going ahead with.
Well, started with the Telegraph, started with this Alistair Heath piece, saying that Rupert Lowe's racist cheerleaders... this was Rupert Lowe must reject... Farage must reject Rupert Lowe's repugnant dance with white nationalism, and it ended with Kemi and Farage must unite for a centre-right coalition of civic nationalism.
I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't particularly think that right-wing Tories are that far away from the positions of Reform anyway. Their whole problem seems to exclusively be with either Reform aren't serious, or they don't like Farage, or they don't think Farage will last, or they think Reform will collapse. I'm thinking of my parents here, really, who... I told my mum that these articles will probably be published by the Telegraph at some point in the future, because I've kept an eye on it all and it's all out in public. And then it all happened, and she asked me about the whole Restore with Reform pact, to which I basically had to tell her, yeah, it was always nonsense. It was a play to effectively try and attack Reform, saying they're weak. Reform threw back the sort of things I've been telling her about, and Mum understood entirely the politics of it. And again, what's ended up happening? Well, she still thinks she'll vote Tory, but is perfectly open to seeing what Reform is all about, as is my dad. And this whole episode has honestly solidified it as, oh, Reform do actually seem quite sensible. So, looking beyond what Lotus Munchers and their audience think, a lot of these people who, despite everything, are still fairly open to Reform, this has been a big win for trying to get those types of people to, well, if not to join Reform, then certainly to listen openly to what we have to say. And so they're open to persuasion. But just honestly, again, barely any of these people talk to anyone outside of their bubbles. And if they do, it's on the Dan Wootton show, and all it is to laugh at them and try and mock them, which, again, they all just look like nerds in a corner in high school. Like, it's not a good look.
Yes. Then there was another one. So Heath got a lot of heat for that piece from me, you lot, Lander. And so he decided to do a follow-up where he decided to actually defend the double standard of saying, I am an ardent nationalist for Israel, previously describing Israel as divine nationalism.
Okay, you're actually going to read the article, or am I going to have to try and search for this article? Because frankly, I just do not believe Connor Tomlinson's own summary of the situation here. I just don't trust it. Because Israel itself has rarely been brought up here, and if the whole thing is, oh, well, you see, it's the subtext we're talking about, then you're completely screwing the whole Downs defence.
Previously saying, I don't understand how every British politician isn't a Zionist. It's a simple proposition that Jews deserve their own country, and it doesn't matter whether you're left or right. The one thing we have to agree on is that Israel should be a country for Jewish people.
I mean, what's actually going on here is that it's a bit of a cringe Sivnat defence of Britain as it exists now. You know, it's probably a bit to the left of what I'd like, but still, it's perfectly legitimate and frankly understandable positions to take. But sort of the first 20 or so paragraphs are basically just a defence of that, and then having a go at Charlie Downs for saying he's a scumbag and traitor, for saying going way beyond the pale is a bad thing, actually. But I mean, I've had this on screen. So these reprobate central beliefs that Britishness is a closed shop determined by blood, which I've literally never believed. And actually, I know Joel's friend of the channel did basically come back to me saying, I'm thinking of writing an article or Substack to basically explain how that's actually true. There's never been policy in Britain about how being British or English or whatever is determined by blood. It's never even been a particularly popular opinion. If it was basically to do more with are you white than anything else. And so, sorry, you can actually have black British people. So there you go. And, you know, this article does have a major problem in that it basically just says either you have to be a civic nationalist or you are a terrible person. Now, as much as ethno-nationalists annoy me, I don't think it's necessarily a illegitimate position to the point where you can just say it's beyond the pale and ignore every argument they make. You do actually have to have a robust defence of these beliefs, and to be honest with you, just saying in the past we've never really cared about skin colour, certainly in recent history, is actually not a good enough reason for this, because effectively all you're saying is because things worked in the past, they can work in the future, and well, we might be at a point where that's not actually true anymore. And so you have to defend it on its own terms in Britain as we know it, and you can still do that relatively easily. I mean, the ethno-nationalists aren't actually that good with their argumentation. They don't really have a good defence of it, but unfortunately just saying, well, actually just appealing to history actually isn't good enough, and then appealing to a moral authority is probably even worse. So I would say Alistair Heath needs to improve on that. But when it actually gets to the defence of Israel, there's no actual double standard, because his first point is that Israel is actually fairly multicultural, in that most way signs are written in Arabic, Muslims are a fifth of the Israeli citizenship, nobody says they aren't Israeli, there are Muslims in senior positions in Israel, amazingly they even allow Sharia courts, and so actually, in ways they're more multicultural than even Reform want. And the second point is that the far right misunderstands Judaism. Yes, Judaism is largely inherited in matrilineal fashion, and all Jews can automatically move to Israel, as can anyone who is at least a quarter Jewish under the law of return. But Western racial categories are irrelevant. Jews are a multiracial people, there are black Jews, etc., etc. And even more importantly, it is possible to convert to Judaism and to join the Jewish nation. The Jewish tribe, though it is discouraged, difficult, and requires effort and takes time, a convert can actually become Israeli. And so it's hard to really call it civic nationalism, maybe more religio-nationalism or theo-nationalism, I guess. It's not a racial thing, and this is the thing that is really getting my goat as well about a lot of far-righties on Twitter talking about Israel, because it's just clear that none of them know what they're talking about. I said it the other day, but Britain at the moment actually has a larger majority percentage than Israel do. Now, albeit Israeli Jews are actually right up in the TFRs internationally at an average of 3 kids a woman, and Muslims are actually slightly below that at something like 2.6, so, you know, the trend's going in the direction the ethno-nationalists would like, I suppose. But my question always is then, well, how do you expect to get white British women to the 3 TFR? And I've basically never heard an answer to that, but that is effectively what you have to do if you want to have Israeli-like politics. If you want Israeli politics as well, you're going to have pride marches, so, you know, you have to swallow your pride on a lot of this, on just how wrong they actually are. So actually reading through this, I'm not really actually seeing any particular double standard. Because again, he's not saying that, you know, you're wrong for having a wish for less migrants to come in, for there to be deportations even, but you do actually have to concede that when it comes to Israel, it's not a racial thing, and it probably never will be. And he finishes this little bit off by saying, I'm actually advocating what Israel have, which is British via conversion, which, let's not make Britishness a religion, but I can sort of get what he means, and I know everyone hates the British values type thing, but he's certainly not the leftist type who basically says just because they have a passport they're British, and that's actually the opposite of what he's saying here anyway. So actually going through this, yeah, wouldn't you know it, Connor Tomlinson's just lied about the whole thing, and again, he's doing it all to be popular with this audience who throw him super chats all the time. It's completely audience captured, and it's his own fault because all he does all the time is make sure everyone hates him. Amazingly, by the way, we're an hour into this and we've still got a good 20 minutes to go of the actual video, I mean. This could end up being 3 hours. I'm not being funny, but I don't have an awful lot to do today, so let's just go for it. I'm not even going to split this into parts.
And then when people say, well, why don't you want the same thing for Britain and why are you calling it racist if that works and you like that, he then attempted to defend that double standard.
As we just went through, he basically said Britishness can be like Jewishness, and we just have to make people convert before we accept them. I mean, again, all he's actually defending there is integration. And actually, he blatantly said they have to reject Islamism, which, incredibly, that's what you have to do to become an Israeli. And Muslims cannot become Israelis unless, obviously, they convert to Judaism, which is a very difficult thing to do anyway. He's basically asking for a far more robust civic nationalism than we have. Shockingly, that's what most Tories and Reform supporters want.
It's just perplexing. I mean, we shouldn't have to engage with this argument because actually, me becoming a hated minority in my own country against my wishes is not up for debate.
Well, you're debating it, so good one. Again, it's only not up for debate if you're absolutely smashing elections, which you're not. And by the way, even then, even Restore activists are not quite sure where they land on this line anyway. As far as most people are concerned, all they're after is way less immigrants. That's all they really care about.
I can kind of feel my inner Oliver Twist coming through, and he's like, please sir, can I have some divine nationalism?
If they bother to read the article, they know that that is actually what he advocates for. What they don't like is that it means some black and other non-white people will actually be able to integrate and come here.
And then this was the piece that was then launched.
Connor,
yes.
What is his rationale for saying it's divine nationalism? Because it's one thing to say that this is the implicit point, and quite another if this is his explicit point.
Oh no, that was his explicit.
Does he have any rationale for it?
As in that? Okay, so that was his actual quote.
Just throwing it out there, I've been through this article again, and I cannot find anywhere where he says divine nationalism. And in fact, I've done a quick Google around and I can't find it anywhere. Wouldn't you know it? Connor Tomlinson is lying yet again. And what's his rationale for it? Well, as we went through, it's effectively, even though he didn't say it, so what I understand he's trying to say is that, well, you have to convert to Judaism, which is a very difficult thing, and that's Israeli version of integration, and therefore you can integrate from there. Which again, he just wants a British version of that. He wants the same thing. His
rationale is that the Jewish people have been expelled, persecuted throughout all of history. This is their land from how many years ago? And
you know the spiel, you know the spiel, you know the spiel. Again, I'm looking through some of Alistair Heath's articles on not just this one on Charlie Downs, but also Zionism. And he effectively says there was legitimate debate about this, obviously, throughout the last century. And then, effectively, Israeli Jews established Israel, defended from numerous wars, and now this is just reality, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, and so anti-Zionism lost anyway. He's not even really bothered about talking about Zionism. He's just saying, Israel does this, and I'd actually quite like a similar system for Brits. You know, the actual system of how Israel works and how it actually brings in more citizens, rather than the meme version, which is just, oh, it's entirely racial, which isn't even true. So this is one of Connor Tomlinson's less egregious pieces of misinformation, is how I'd put that.
They've come back and reclaimed it and rejuvenated it and made it the only thriving democracy in the Middle East, therefore isn't it to be celebrated? And it's like, okay, fine, fair enough. Why can't we do the same?
We can, and he's perfectly happy with that, as he actually said if you bother to read it. Anyway, I'm really bored of talking about Israel and Connor completely giving incorrect information on what people you're talking about have to say. So yeah, whatever, we'll move on from Israel.
Restore co-founder, quote, suggested Farage had been bought by Jews. Now, that's in scare quotes. Where did that scare quote come from? Well, it came from a chap called Alex Hearn, who, it will not surprise you to learn, is a spokesman for Labour against anti-Semitism.
I mean, it's not just him who said this. Again, I remember seeing this tweet, and it was said by me and a whole bunch of other people, so he's not unique in saying this. And again, Labour were pretty good at finding anti-Semites within their own party to kick out. Just saying.
So the Telegraph have resorted to quoting an ethnic and Labour partisan.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good history of finding anti-Semites and kicking them out of the Labour Party, you know? I guess ethnic partisan comes in because he finds anti-Semites. I guess that's where that comes from. Bit of an odd statement.
To attack Restore Britain here, to try to block a merger between, or a pact between, Restore and Reform, to like perform political necromancy on the Tories at the next election.
Oh, again, I just don't think people particularly like anti-Semitism. Gonna be honest with you, I think that's people's problem. They just do not like anti-Semitism, full stop. It's always got to be this extra stuff. It's like, you know, yeah, people have wanted Tories and Reform to merge for ages. Oh, this is just a way for them to do it. Absolutely nothing has changed on that conversation over the past 2 weeks. Nothing at all. I think people are just massively looking for a conspiracy to sort of ease their mind that, oh, this is really why he's doing it. No, sorry. People just really hate anti-Semitism. It really is that simple. And as everyone said anyway, and even restorers have admitted, this was never put forward as a serious offer. So it's like, oh my god, can you believe they're moving away from Restore to have a Tory alliance? That's what the Telegraph want. Yeah, I know. I've known that for years.
So Hearn says, Restore Britain's spokesman insinuated that Nigel Farage had been bought by Jews. Thank you for mind reading.
I mean, if that's like the only reasonable interpretation here. If that's not what happened, you need to tell me the alternative. This is what I love. Like, Farage, when he says something's ridiculous, gives the alternative. For some reason, these people just think you can say something's ridiculous, even though it's the only obvious interpretation from this. Like, seriously, I want to know, what else could this mean?
The oldest smear about money and influence delivered as a picture so that nothing could be quoted back at him. It's not an aberration. Downes has said his party believes Britain is a people defined by indigenous British ancestry and Christian faith, a definition under which no Jew and no other minority can be British, however many generations we have been here.
Hate to say it, but where's he wrong? If that's not what you mean, you have to readjust what you mean and what you say. But if you're just calling him stupid and saying that's a stupid interpretation, sorry, you actually have to explain why.
Now, in the previous piece by Alistair Heath, he acknowledges that Israel has an ethnic definition of Judaism because it has a right of return, and anyone who has at least one Jewish grandparent is entitled to move to Israel.
Yeah, he also mentioned the whole conversion thing, by the way. He also mentioned that over a fifth of Israeli citizens are Muslim. So again, total nonsense. I talked about Israel again. I exclusively talk about Israel these days. Whenever the dork right bring it up, it's so annoying.
Funnily enough, I've got a segment about that coming up.
Oh, excellent. So we'll get onto that in a bit then.
Again, really can't help themselves. They're allergic to helping themselves. Again, not that it's necessarily bad to talk about Israel, it's just that there's a lot of disinformation here.
So I would never be recognised as Jewish if I moved to Israel and didn't have any Jewish children and had no Jewish ancestry, and that's fine for them to identify their identity that way.
That's only true if you don't convert to Judaism, which is a very, very difficult task, by the way. You can also be considered a Israeli citizen if, obviously, you married a Jewish partner, which you didn't. And again, by the way, this is basically how Britain works already. You marry a Brit, you can become a British citizen. It works in a lot of countries like that, actually. But again, this is just completely ignoring the fact that actually there is a route to integration. And yes, it is through a religious sect. But honestly, if your argument is you have to be Christian to end up being British if you want to integrate, I mean, that's just wild to say at this point. Again, I'm Catholic, much like most of the Zoomer Waffin, but I've actually been a cradle Catholic, so I know how this all works a lot better. And there's an awful lot of Catholics in the world that I would say probably shouldn't be allowed to be British. I'll leave it at that.
But we are not allowed to identify our own identity as something exclusive, even if that doesn't mean mistreating people with other identities.
You agree with Alistair Heath then? Because he literally says that in the article you didn't read.
Instead, we just get called mean names and have the Telegraph write endless hit pieces about anyone who thinks that way.
Well, yeah, but once again, you are just throwing out complete nonsense to the world that is very much in line with people who said very similar things and felt justified to do very heinous acts. Now, obviously, no one's accusing you of doing that. However, it does play into the whole stochastic terrorism thing, which, again, you bring up later. But anyway.
Now, we would think, okay, Labour partisan, Telegraph clearly has an agenda here. Who cares? Well, this got amplified, and he was interviewed by, yes, he looks like Roz from Monsters, Inc. He was interviewed by Alex Phillips on Talk.
Goodness me, Connor, people are glass houses. But yeah, shockingly, these people don't like anti-Semitism and will listen to someone who was at the forefront of kicking out anti-Semitism at the Labour Party. You know, shocking.
And this led to a pretty horrendous YouTube thumbnail, which they've since redacted.
Yeah, I mean, even I'll admit it's I get the problem with that thumbnail, I'll put it that way. So I don't really blame them for changing that, but this is where the whole stochastic terrorism comes in. Oh my god, they're calling us Hitler. That means the left think we're an easy and acceptable target. Which I have words to say on that, but again, if we're talking about stochastic terrorism, and people are literally being stabbed in Britain over what people think of Israel, and you're pushing that nonsense,
Now, the reason I'm raising this is because we have this term on the left, stochastic terrorism, right? They know what they're doing.
Yes.
They're putting you in the crosshairs of anyone febrile, ideological, and delusional enough to take this claim seriously.
Damn, I wonder if any British Jews have been affected by this term stochastic terrorism. I mean, to be honest with you, this is where part of the problem comes in, because at what point is this just a you're not allowed to say anything about us or call us names? Because the thing is, if you are an ethno-nationalist anti-Semite with socialist tendencies, how is that not fair to call you a national socialist? Because the thing is, when it comes to people like Donald Trump, say, where stochastic terrorism has all come from, or Nigel Farage, calling these people racist or anti-Semites or even Nazis, it is actually untrue. I hate to say it, but when it comes to Charlie Downs, in a court of law, could he actually convince people that he's not, or doesn't have National Socialist tendencies at the very least? Well, we don't know, but this is where the problem with stochastic terrorism then comes in. As I say, at what point is it just a please no bully? And I say this as someone who doesn't even really care to call them neo-Nazis or Hitler, because it just sounds cringe. I'd rather just call them weirdos.
Because in post-war morality, if you're Hitler, and the second founding of Britain was fighting fascism, then killing Hitler is morally permissible.
So what, we're not allowed to call anyone Hitler ever? Again, I think that's going a bit too far with this stochastic terrorism defence. And again, that's not me calling Charlie Downs Hitler. This is me saying, well, at what point is it actually acceptable? Where's the line, in other words?
And when was the last time that actually happened? Oh, about a couple of weeks ago when they killed Anne Widdecombe.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's pretty obvious with Anne Widdecombe it's over the line to call her fascist or Hitler or certainly anti-Semitic. But again, this stochastic terrorism thing, it only ever seems to be brought up when it's only going to affect you. And I'm much more interested in, well, let's be honest here, what labels are actually accurate, though. And to be honest with you, I think it's besides the point anyway. We shouldn't be having full-blown terrorism as it is anyway. So I'd much rather get to a point where we can freely call each other names like Hitler and not have this stupid offence because there's absolute maniacs going around with knives or, well, batons beating old women to death.
And then before that, when they killed Charlie Kirk. And then before that, when they shot Donald Trump. And then consistently when they've been trying to kill Nigel Farage.
Yeah, well, take it up with the talk producers or the online editors. At the end of the day, neither Alex Phillips nor the Labour guy had any control over what thumbnail was put up there. It will have been given to an editor who said, right, this is the final draft of this particular thumbnail, let's put it up. And neither Alex Phillips nor anyone else who was actually on that show had any editorial insight over it, so you can't really blame them for that. You can only blame the talk producers, who, in my opinion, did the right thing and took it down. I can't remember if they took the whole video down or just changed the thumbnail, but, you know, if we're going to complain about Reform being called these things, it only makes sense that you keep it consistent with other righties, even if it is potentially more accurate.
And I must say as well, Alex Phillips knows this, because I did a segment with her, actually, about the murder of Charlie Kirk the morning after.
Yeah, Alex Phillips may know this. She didn't have any editorial insight over any of the thumbnail or titling of this. I mean, again, Connor Tomlinson has actually written for outlets before, so he should know that he has no control over the title or the thumbnail of what's been published. I've written for outlets before. I know this, and I've only done it twice. So the same's obviously true for YouTube channels. Do you think Alex Phillips asked for that quote to be in the thumbnail with a picture of Lowe? No, I don't think she did. I think she's got better things to worry about with her 3-hour slot on Talk.
And I hate to raise this, but I must, because those previous hit pieces on Charlie Downs, they came from Alex Phillips.
I said this on the stream the other day, but it's I hate to do this because it's drama. Oh, don't get me involved in drama. Screw that. You boys all revel in this. You all revel in it because it gets you attention, and let's face it, it's quite fun. But it's a bit uncouth to admit that, so that's why you always lie about it. Shut up. You are drama addicts, and you love being in the centre of it all. If you didn't love it all, you wouldn't constantly get yourself in the middle of drama. It's really not difficult to avoid.
She admitted to ringing around the BBC, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, and other enemy outlets, specifically about Downes' tweet, trying to get articles written about him.
Welcome to the media. Yeah, again, people find anti-Semitism sickening. And honestly, even I found it quite odd that it's taken this long. And honestly, I was quite happy Alex Phillips was the person who was trailblazing all this. Because it's all been true. And it made me feel less insane being what felt like the only person on the internet who was making any sort of content on this exact issue.
I got a massive pile, and I still get abused left, right and centre by the thugs and the misogynists and the psychopaths who seem to support that party.
I mean, again, I've got nothing wrong with her saying that because that just seems to be 100% true. But, I mean, you're talking about a party that is pretty much Twitter exclusive. Of course, you're going to get piled on at Twitter. So, you know, at least expect it. But I'm not going to begrudge her for complaining about it because it ain't great. Anyway, they play an entire 3-minute clip from Talk, which there is absolutely no way that's under fair use, by the way. Which, you know, I'm not going to snitch on them or anything. I'm just surprised that YouTube allow it to be kept up. But just letting you know, amazingly, when they actually go through something and read something, Connor Tomlinson can't lie about it. So he was actually just accurate about all that.
So what we're seeing happen here is a coordinated pile-on by, let's say, second-tier surrogates. They're not at the leadership.
Oh my god, how profound. Oh, god, I really hate the way the Zoomer often talk and express things like this. You're a B-tier journalist, actually. Yeah, I get the idea. They're still part of the journalist cast. Just say journalists are piling on. And yet, they don't need leadership at all to get on this, because everyone in the media hates anti-Semitism. Well, most people in the right-wing media hate anti-Semitism. Shouldn't say everyone, because the BBC have shown that that's not true. But again, it's not shocking that they've waited till this point to attack them all, because again, I don't think it's really to do necessarily with the whole pact with Farage. I think they just made a lot of news and then they decided to go on the attack. Because frankly, it makes them look weak, especially after the Manchester election. They're not getting the groundwork they thought they would. They're not getting the votes they thought they would. And it's clear they don't think they're actually going to win an election in 2029. And showing your weakness here, they just found mush and pushed. And frankly, you've not actually raised a defence of this. You've basically just said they're idiots for saying Downes is an anti-Semite. Without any justification as to how what he said wasn't anti-Semitic and part of a whole Jewish conspiracy. Which, by the way, is how most people have taken it. Most people are actually on the side of the Telegraph here. Sorry if your bubble doesn't see that, but it is what has happened. And that's out of the 2% that even pay attention to politics.
Of some in Reform who are opposed to people in Restore Britain because of ideological or personal reasons.
Basically entirely personal. Your policy positions to the left of Reform, apart from maybe the economics one. But all the immigration stuff, all to the left of Reform. So it's ideological insofar as there's a few people on board with the Jewish conspiracy thing, which, by the way, this entire segment has not done anything to dispel. If anything, it's made it worse.
Coordination with enemy outlets, running to people like the BBC, the Mail, who were trying to scupper Reform's chances at the last election, saying they'd split the vote and stop the Tories from getting in.
Hold on a sec. I thought the whole point now from the Lotus Munchers was that Farage shouldn't have even stood because he was splitting the vote. Hold on, what? I obviously know Connor Tomlinson's a guest that they bring in who isn't necessarily on board with just bleating everything Carl says, but nobody pulled him up on this, and again, it does make it very confusing as a person who dips into the Lotus Munchers content from time to time. You know, what's the official position on this? And if there isn't one, fair enough, but you're not really helped the case for supporting Restore if that's the case.
Or people at the Telegraph that have just been bought by a German left-winger that we'll get onto later, to try to ruin the lives of people in Restore Britain using the most venomous accusations according to post-war morality, and the result is bringing Boris Johnson back.
Sorry, this is about bringing Boris Johnson back. Where did that come from? Boris Johnson isn't coming back. Boris Johnson has effectively accepted he's never coming back because the Boris wave has just scuppered any chance of that. The online right have a massive win there, so I've no idea where that came from. But again, I mean, it's it's not shocking the BBC didn't publish this, but yeah, she went round all sorts of places. She'll just have asked people she knew. That's all she's doing. If she could name names there, she would, but she isn't. She's just saying people who work here in X, Y, and Z, who I know, like, and trust, and they didn't publish anything on it until this week, and I'm very glad they did. That's all she's saying there. And the idea that this is a coordinated push, I mean, again, the only coordination is within the Telegraph from, like, 2 journalists. And I've even heard it said on the Daily Tea before, they've known this stuff for ages. All this was just being effectively built up as a portfolio to drop at once when you showed weakness, and you did. And I'm not being funny, but the reaction here is showing that the damage is actually being done.
But something weird is going on here. She can't be this irrationally angry about this. There's got to be something else going on.
Oh, no. I completely sympathise with that. I was going mad when I felt like I was the only person pointing all this stuff out. And honestly, the vindication I feel now is beyond euphoric. I can completely understand why Alex Phillips was getting as frustrated as she was, because I was getting this frustrated. You can hear it in all the videos. Just, why isn't anyone covering this? It's all obvious. It's out in the open. Now we know. They were waiting for you to show mush, and you did. So well done, the media. You did your job like you always do quite well.
Alex, and so I've gotten a bit of... I actually wasn't going to do this segment. I was going to leave this sort of stuff to Dan.
He's doing it again. He's doing it again. Oh, I didn't really want to get in the drama. I wasn't even going to do this segment, you know. Yeah, you were. You love the drama. Shut up.
But I felt compelled to, because Alex, for the last few months, has dedicated turning her show into Radio Rwanda, but for Rupert Lowe and Restore.
Well, from the clips you see, yeah, but I know people that listen to her, and no, she goes on about the left a hell of a lot more. It's just she is pretty much exclusively the only person in the media who is talking about Restore. And, well, a lot of people call in and give her support and say, yeah, you're right, you know, I'm glad that someone's brought this up as well. Thank you for informing us. So again, the damage is being done, and there's not a lot you can do about it. But if that was your only point, why would you say, oh, that's not all I want to talk about? Because that's fine. I reckon he's going to bring up his wedding.
Yes.
All the clips coming out that people are making are just demented.
I mean, the stuff that she was just doing, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of those weird lefties who will stay up until 4 o'clock in the morning making editing changes to Wikipedia pages to smear somebody. It's like...
Well, again, the problem you have is that we actually have the receipts. Again, I don't know why they pretend otherwise, but things you say online are actually basically there forever. And Alex will be making these accusations, followed by, here's an example of some tweets. Which, for your defence, is, oh, we tweeted something, so why do you care? The whole point of your party is that it's popular on social media. So actually it does matter what you say there, way more than other parties.
We on the right, we just don't behave the way that she's behaving.
I'm not being funny, but the whole first part of this segment has just been total nonsense about Alistair Heath. So actually, everyone behaves this way. It's just human nature. Like, get over it. You can only really claim you're better than Alex Phillips because you don't go on a mad shouting spree on your show as often, but who cares, you know? Alex is entertaining when she does that, frankly.
There is an energy of a... jilted ex-lover about it.
Sorry, from Alex Phillips? What are you talking about? That needs to be explained instantly. What the hell are you on about?
So this post sparked a lot of controversy. It's just pure invective and personal attacks.
Welcome to Twitter. The defense of Charlie Downs included tweets where he was calling people scum and traitors and other personal attacks. Like, what are you on about, bruv?
So, responding to one of Alistair Heath's articles, she says, they, Restore Britain, are very warped, very bitter, obsessive men, pumped full of feigned self-assurance to cover brittle egos and prickly insecurities. Most of these trad men working as ruthless mouthpieces don't have driver's licenses, let alone real-world jobs. They possess unhealthy sexist attitudes and seem to be myopically obsessed with a rambling old egomaniac who can't finish a thought and bangs on about Farage being mean to him.
Dude, I just looked up the thing he was talking about. That's true. That's like 100%. Everything you said was true.
Yeah, let's be absolutely fair here. You don't need to read out the whole tweet. It is a massive essay. But she has basically got a good read on it all. I mean, Carl Benjamin does not have a driving license. I know Charlie Downs does, but have they had a real job? No, none of them have had real jobs. If you consider a real job to be getting bits and pieces on the media, then more fool you, I guess. But that's not a real job. People invited onto GB News and Talk typically are either fully fledged journalists who that is their day job, like Alex Phillips, or there's some political spad, they're an MP, list goes on. Catherine Blakelock threw it all out there that effectively everyone hired by Rupert Lowe for Restore Britain, they all basically work from home and they use it as an excuse to do very, very little. I mean, getting FOIs, there are people who do far more than Lewis Blackpool does in far, far, far quicker fashion and do way more of them and do it in a better way in their spare time. Connor Tomlinson at this point is effectively a professional YouTuber. I've not seen him write a piece for any outlet for ages now. And if that's his gig, so be it. But let's be fair as well. Going on camera to complain, again, it's this whole problem with calling something a real job. I know what she means. People who don't go into an office every day, or, you can work from home and do that. I've been working from home for ages. But don't have a boss, don't really have deadlines to work toward, whose talents are very, very, very much not being particularly honed, because all they really do is sit on a camera and whinge for a few hours a day, or, as I say, God knows what Charlie Downs does. He's head of, director of campaigns, whatever it is. Campaigns director. What campaigns has he directed? Because Scott Benton took over for Makerfield, God knows what was going on over in the Manchester election, but I didn't even see him turn up for that, so what the hell is he even doing? So yeah, the read was just 100% true, and I don't know how they're going to deal with this, but I think Connor bringing up his wedding and lying about Alex, about how she was too drunk to attend, I think that really showed that she hit a nerve.
Truth, facts, and scrutiny mean nothing to these self-professed intellectuals. It's cultish, which is what makes it disturbing.
As we've gone through so far, yeah, I mean, you're fine to say absolute nonsense about Alistair Heath. That's literally all just completely skewered if you actually read his article. And yeah, there is a cult around though, there obviously is. I do not understand it from the ethno-nationalists at all, but they seem to at least admit now that they understand that he's a senile old Tory. And actually, the cult of personality is around Charlie Downs himself, and they're expecting him to effectively defenestrate Rupert and take over the party. Which, honestly, the sooner that happens, the better, because Charlie Downs is the man who is going to kill the party. Because I happen to know a fair bit about Charlie Downs, and one thing I do know is that when he's criticised ever, he doesn't know how to handle it, and he can't handle it, and he basically turns into a recluse. Why do you think every time he does a bit of a media round, he's on for like a week or two, does 3 shows, whatever, and you don't see him for months? It's because he can't handle the criticism. That's the only reason.
They cannot see how similar they are to woke leftists. Like the radical left, the cognitive dissonance must be off the charts, but is suppressed under a warped, self-indulgent identity of deluded crusaderism. Shudder. Now,
again, that is basically true. Like, this is just a distillation of my past 2 or 3 years of criticism of the Zoomerwaffen. And sorry, but sometimes personal attacks are actually called for. I'd say with the way that they've all been acting for the past couple of years, it's all warranted. I'm not being funny, but Connor's entire shtick, as I went through my video at Christmas, it appears to be just try and make as many enemies on the right as, well, just as many enemies in general as possible. That seems to be all he cares about. Because how can he be establishment if he's taken seriously by anyone even at Talk TV? So this is what happens in the end. No one really takes you seriously, but at least you get a few £1,000 from Americans who have more money than sense. Honestly, if Connor didn't look out with this whole Catholic trad LARP thing, he would have ended up being a Twitch thought, like Finister, and probably would have transitioned because a load of Americans would have given him money for that. Much like what happened to Finister. Because the man doesn't have convictions, the man doesn't have beliefs, the man will just say whatever it takes to get money, and I'm sorry, a lot of people are really like this. When I was younger, in my 20s, I thought people on YouTube were actually a lot more dedicated to truth and what they believed in, and were basically principled. I got to 30 and I've basically found out there's maybe 1% of people online. Sorry. The world sucks because of that, but there we are. It's human nature. And even I'll be the first to say I'm not 100% principled all of the time, but I do at the very least try and keep consistent. Like with the Talk TV thumbnail. Yeah, they were right to get rid of it, but we do need a nuanced conversation about what is and isn't stochastic terrorism, and whether you're just trying to stop people criticising you.
There's a lot of projection going on there.
I was about to say the exact same thing. And I haven't brought my post-response up to this because I was quite harsh.
You also just straight up lied. You said that she was too drunk to attend. That's not true at all. She had a morning show and couldn't make your wedding. And I know the response to that is effectively, couldn't she go after? And I can only assume that you have never had to go to a wedding with a woman before, because a wedding is an all-day event and it takes them literal hours to get ready for it. So no. She couldn't have made it after. Unless I suppose she only made it to the evening reception. But obviously she decided against that, so whatever. I suppose the worst thing you can claim she did is that she didn't directly tell Connor Tomlinson, but what's he called? Andrew Gold came out to say, actually, she let me know. And it's the sort of thing with a wedding. Do you directly text the person whose wedding it is? Because odds are they're not going to look at their phone all day. Well, they shouldn't do anyway. Connor Tomlinson might. And so you let someone else who you know is there know, and perhaps they can tell the groom. That makes perfect sense. But one thing I will tell you, don't ruin your wife's best day of her life over some Twitter drama, you absolute lunatic.
But I did point something out. If you're going to make constant personal attacks, and it's not just about party politics or policy, she has invented the claim that Restore Britain want to ban black people from pubs, so I don't think she has a particularly good grasp of Restore Britain's policy. Never.
Okay, for a start, again, everyone sends personal attacks to everyone else, so let's not pretend you're above that in particular, Mr. Tomlinson. Secondly, I'll admit I don't follow Alex Phillips particularly closely, but when on earth has she ever said Restore Britain policy is to kick black people out of pubs? When was that a thing?
Nevertheless, if you're going to do that, you invite yourself to scrutiny, right? Old biblical injunction. Remove the log from your own eye before trying to remove the speck from your brother's.
Connor, you of all people cannot say this when it comes to online drama. Come on. You can't be saying that. You're not Jesus.
And I did point out that your standpoint for accusing these young men, these young trad men, of insincerity, dishonesty, not having their life together, your standpoint is one of a 43-year-old woman who hasn't had children because her own relationships have failed, not because of any great tragedy, but because of your own choices.
What on earth are we doing here, man? Are you a mean girl? I just love it as well. I've not brought up my own post because I felt a bit harsh, but I'm just going to repeat the harshest point I said anyway. Again, the actual reason he doesn't want to bring it up is because he has to go into the whole she was too drunk to come to my wedding thing, and he knows that's just a total and complete lie. Honestly, he's not changed at all over this half a year. His only goal seems to be make enemies of absolutely everyone he can do. It is ridiculous.
Who, and I hated to say it, it was uncomfortable, but they came to my wedding and she got too drunk to do so.
Oh, he said it anyway. Why would you not just put it up? What the I may have been a little too harsh. Anyway, here are the most harsh things I said. And again, this turned out to be a lie. Turned out to be a complete lie. Oh, on my wedding day, you were drinking a couple of ciders with your workmates. Yeah, after work. And again, pretty shocking, by the way, that you don't know this given you have a wife, but women do take quite a while to get ready for a wedding.
And I was going to leave it at that. But then she decided to write another hit piece in the Telegraph.
Oh, I hate this. I hate this all. I hate drama. Anyway, look at me laugh like a chimpanzee because this drama has actually led to attention on me again. He's such a pathetic weasel, honestly.
And that includes an entire passage on this. And again, I wasn't going to include this in the segment because it's a bit he said, she said.
Oh, give it a rest, you absolute weaselly twink. You are revelling in the fact that you get to make personal attacks on someone and feel justified. Don't give me this nonsense. We all love drama. Get over yourself, but don't pretend to be above it.
Politics. But she then decided to say, Connor Tomlinson alleged that I had not attended his wedding because I was drunk, shaming me for not having children, suggesting this was the genesis of psychological imbalance while painting a mawkish 1950s idol of a merry band of restored brethren bouncing babies on knees as a paradigm of fulfilled superior existence.
I mean, I have just come to the conclusion after all these years that obsessing about women being childless is just a weird thing to go on about. Like, sorry, we're not putting the sexual revolution genie back in the bottle, and honestly, we were in the process of just finding a new way forward dealing with all this. And honestly, it just puts a lot of people off when you effectively try and claim someone is psychologically damaged because they're a childless spinster. Honestly, I've met enough women in their 30s who are childless and single who are perfectly reasonable people. And I've met enough women with children, many in fact, who are absolutely crazy. So Let's not pretend having children is some magic bullet to cure any mental illness you're accusing Alex Phillips of having.
I mean, most of them are married or engaged, and some of them have got kids.
Yeah, and honestly, they seem less well adjusted than Alex Phillips. So what does that tell you?
So, she claims that I was lying about it. I was presenting breakfast the weekend of his wedding and concluded the round trip to the outer frontiers of East London before another 4-hour dawn show was impossible.
Yeah, that's not unfair at all. Because bear in mind, it's a large trip, and not only that, she has to get ready for it, which, again, with women takes ages. And yes, going to weddings tends to be quite a late and committed evening. So sorry, I'm sorry that you weren't high up in her thoughts enough for her to organise not having that morning show after, but honestly, if this is how you're going to act about it, I think she feels vindicated about this now, so well done.
It's a 20-minute train straight from London Bridge right next to the studio, but that's fine.
Again, you have a wife. How do you not know that women take ages to get ready for weddings? I don't understand this. I don't understand why he thinks it's just, just simply get a train and come in your work stuff. No. No woman's going to do that. No man's going to do that, actually.
Didn't give me any warning about it. And again, saying that
Did you accept the invitation?
Oh, this was on the day. This was when...
So she previously accepted the invitation?
Yeah, we had the seat plan done, we had our food ordered, just didn't show up.
Well, that is rude, don't get me wrong, because that is a cost to Connor Tomlinson and his wife. Well, let's face it, it's much more likely his parents. So that is annoying, so I sympathise there, but the way you've acted about it since, I mean, you're not acting like a man in his 20s who's about to have twins. You know, you do need to grow up relatively quickly here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so what she's saying is, and the reason I'm highlighting this is because if you're going to make character attacks on Restore Britain, and you're going to accuse them of dishonesty, and you're going to say these people are unfit to run the country, you might want to be truthful.
Again, Connor, you've been caught out on a lie here. I mean, what Alex did was rude, but it's perfectly legitimate to say, I wasn't true drunk to go, you liar. I just had a work commitment either side of the wedding, and unfortunately couldn't commit to it on the day. And again, she did let Andrew Gold know, which isn't the worst contingency plan in the world, but either way, Alex Phillips was rude, therefore I can be the nastiest piece of work I want to be to her. Again, it does need to be questioned. What part of that attitude is Catholic?
And the Telegraph might want to actually platform some truthful people. Because if you're going to say that I lied about you, and then this post appeared to light the blue touch paper for one of the most challenging days in her career, hundreds of accounts accusing false allegations of alcoholism, drug abuse, psychosis, and barrenness. So apparently I instigate a horrible pile-on by lying.
I mean, I'm not being funny, but it is Twitter. You literally did. That is what happened. And again, let's face it, people know this all the time. I've even been accused of this, and I've only got 3,000 followers on Twitter. When you quote tweet and make a long post about something like this, let's face it, part of the reason we do it is to signal to all our people that we've found a target. I'm happy to say at the very least that I never see anyone in my replies or anything like that who is overly harsh to people. And if they are, I tend to mute them. Because to an extent, you can't actually control your own audience, sure, but it's also not incorrect to say that you instigated a pile-on. Because with however many thousands of followers you have, and there is absolutely no way you're in the dark on how they act as well, you knew that was a possibility, and the cynic in me is saying you wanted it too.
You might not want to post photos of yourself 2 hours before the wedding, having a bunch of cider with your producer.
God forbid a woman have after work drinks. Again, hours to get ready, hours to get there, organising, transport back. You will be wasted at a wedding, it's a wedding after all, and then you've got work at 6 a.m. Yeah, I'm not being funny. I can see why she went out for a few ciders and had a relaxing evening instead, especially if this is how you're going to act.
So, yeah, not quite a lie.
You'll notice there that neither Stelios nor Dan, I mean, I clipped out a bit where Dan goes sort of, yeah. There's not really vast support for this. I think everyone on this panel knows that Connor has just put his foot in his mouth. But they're sort of incapable of having a go at each other on camera, which I can completely understand. But someone really does need to tell Connor that he is in the complete wrong for this. I mean, Alex did a wrong too by not turning up to the wedding she was invited to and RSVP'd. Don't get me wrong, but how we react to things like this is also pretty bad. And again, if I was your wife, I'd be pretty annoyed that you've turned the best day of my life into some pathetic Twitter drama to have a go at someone over politics. I think my girlfriend would literally leave me for something like that, and she'd be justified.
Yeah, I think you got on that one.
And so,
yeah, there's absolutely no enthusiasm behind that whatsoever. I mean, maybe I'm reading too far into it, but I think Dad would privately admit, yeah, Connor's just being a bit of a melt here. Again, the title of this video, by the way, is It's Just Shameless at this point, and it's supposed to be about the Lowe versus Farage pact. And it's turned into talking about this. We're now talking about Connor Tomlinson's wedding. I mean, again, wasn't anyone else who brought it up. Connor just took exception to being effectively called a weirdo incel and decided, actually, you're too drunk to go to weddings, so what leg do you have to stand on? And then loads of people came out saying that's just a lie, though. You'll notice no one brought up the Andrew Gold tweet that basically corroborated Alex Phillips' story, but anyway, these people aren't honest, so what do you expect?
So I don't want to make these points, but the point I'm making is the people that are making these attacks on Restore to try and ruin their lives have either a hidden agenda or are not particularly credible themselves.
Okay, so one, hidden agenda. The agenda's not particularly hidden. We just don't like anti-Semitism and racism. That's pretty much it. Number two, not credible themselves. I'm not being funny, but the only person whose credibility has been lost from this is yours, Connor, because everyone can see that you're lying about people when they insult you or your friends. Which, there's nothing wrong with tit-for-tat insults on Twitter. Every politician and political journalist does that now. The problem is when you make a long post like that to try and absolutely skewer her by saying she's too drunk or in psychosis to actually make any salient points, it turns out you just lied about the whole thing. So the point that you've said you've just made is not what you made. You've just come across, as I say, as a petulant child. One that, again, I've said this on Twitter and it's got some popularity for it, but one that I think should just be blacklisted from journalism in general now. There's nothing for him to add. He may have done good work in the past, but this is where he's at this point. I go on camera and whinge about other people and say the same script I've said for the past 5 years anyway. What's the point? What is the point of having someone like this, so bereft of talent, that the highlight of his week was lying about some other woman who didn't turn up at his wedding? And he's actually justified to be annoyed at that, by the way, but the reaction like this, I wouldn't trust him with anything again. I don't think people should trust him anyway, because he comes out with DMs that shouldn't be leaked all the time, but here he is. Once again, I think he's in the complete right for backstabbing someone else. Like, you can't trust him. Blacklist, blacklist, blacklist.
And then there's just, again, the continued crash out. So Nicole Lampert wrote this piece. Lowe once fought alongside me for Israel. Now Restore poses a grave threat to Britain's Jews. Remind me, when was the last time that a Restore Britain supporter decided to stab at a synagogue?
Never. When's the last time a Labour member killed a Reform politician? Never, but, you know, still stochastic terrorism. When's the last time anyone at Talk TV stabbed a right-wing politician or journalist to death? Never, but you'd still accuse them of stochastic terrorism. Again, this double standard, it's not even funny at this point. This double standard's just absolutely ridiculous. And again, it's really bothered me that he's acted like Jesus with the whole log in your eye, splinter in your brother's. Sorry, but you do actually have to have some self-awareness at some point, otherwise one day you are just going to get yourself punched in the face. Like, that is going to happen. I'm actually amazed it's not happened at this point, but I suppose this is the problem with only communicating with people over the internet. There's no chance that you get punched in the face, which shockingly has happened to me before, which is why I think I've muted my stings when it comes to a lot of what I say online. What I say online is largely in line with what I would say to people's faces. And yes, I would call Connor Tomlinson a petulant child to his face, by the way.
Oh, they haven't. No, that's Muslims, isn't it? And Restore have said they're going to deport most of them.
As of Reform, by the way. In fact, Reform would deport more, but there we go.
And it's weird because she actually says in this, I've seen, in tracking Restore for a few months, I've seen it slither around the edges of and then gradually imbibe conspiracy theories about immigrants, people of colour, Muslims and Jews.
You're actually going to read this article, or you're just going to say that's ridiculous and move on? Because again, it's something that I've had to say quite a lot, but these articles do actually have their receipts.
Does she name the conspiracies?
Well, but also...
That's a great question, Dan. I wonder why Connor didn't bother to answer that.
Okay. Joseph Cohen, ginger guy, Jewish guy, left Britain because he felt there was too much anti-Semitism and has moved to Israel.
Okay, what the hell are we doing here? What's this got to do with the article?
Actually made a pretty coherent video on this. And he said, Jews are approaching like nationalist politics the wrong way. Because the moment you decide to identify as a minority among one of many minorities, and you decide to say, if it's an attack on one of us, it's an attack on all of us, and you side with things like, you know, Muslims or Africans who tend to be committing most of the anti-Semitic attacks, and you say, actually, the self-confident European or English majorities are our real threat, the real threat is the far right, then you have taken a side against them.
Most people are just against both, my dude. What do you mean? Sorry, why would you be on side with people who are just antagonistic towards you anyway? How does that even make sense? I know a fair few leftists are obviously on board with joining the minorities, but a lot of right-wing British Jews I know, no, they're just fine with where the Tories and Reform are at the moment. You know, if you then have another right-wing party that's pretty explicitly, yeah, we're going to do things a bit differently, let's say, then of course they're going to complain about it, just like they complained about it when it was a problem in Labour. Like, what are we doing here? You have to shut up and accept our idiocy? Do you think they're going to do that? I don't think so.
And then, when they say, well, why are you siding against us? That then looks to you like anti-Semitism, and then you double down on the policies and the side that is not just getting you killed, but is also getting white people killed.
I mean, okay, yeah, there are idiot leftist Jewish people that do that. That's not the Telegraph. Again, their mind's been completely one-shotted just by the amount of disinformation they've had to spread about reform. Connor Tomlinson was one of the early canaries to actually manage to do this, and he's been horrible about them for ages. You know, the whole critical friend thing, no one bought that, and not even Connor Tomlinson, I think, bought that properly, because it's just total nonsense. He's been unfairly maligning them for years now. When he saw Restore wasn't going to go anywhere, he thought, oh, I'll be the first one to counter-signal them, maybe I can get a job back in Reform, but no, Reform have a portfolio on him and things he said about Reform that are not critical or friendly, or are critical but very unfriendly, and they're not going to let him back in. I actually happen to know this. And so now that he's basically been told to do one, quite spectacularly, he's now going full backing of Restore for no other reason than it's because it makes him money. But I'll just say this utter nonsense, and again, I'm with Dan. Do the smart thing first. What does she actually say? Of all Lotus Eaters, at least Dan, as much as he is conspiracy brain, at least he asks the right questions first.
So exactly. So that is always my question to the Jewish population. Is like, why don't you think like that guy? That guy gets it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of them do. You don't have a monopoly on British nationalism in the United Kingdom. And it's honestly wild to me that you think you do. But even supporters of the Tories, even they're basically on side with what Reform want. They just want to do it in a way that doesn't make it feel cringe like Reform very much makes them feel. So they just stick about with Tories despite the obvious downfall of the Tories going on. And the fact they can't be trusted. But they do think like that guy. Most British Jews do. He's talking about leftist Jewish people there.
And unfortunately, some do. Most don't, and certainly nobody being platformed by the Telegraph do.
Show your working, go through it, show where she's wrong.
Because then, in the same week they publish this.
Incredible, they don't go through it, so I'm going to go through it for you. Doing exactly this is what stopped me from being any sort of left wing, by the way, because the left did this all the time. They just assert something, and even on the same panel there's a reasonable question here, so that was actually slightly better than leftists, but there's a reasonable question there of what was actually said. Oh no, don't bother with that, we'll just move on. We'll just have a go at British Jews again, because we heard another British Jew make a salient point that actually it turns out a lot of British Jews actually concede anyway. But oh no, we're the true nationalists. We're the only ones you can support if you're really worried about nationalism. It's just like, no, again, you've just shot yourself in the foot for no reason. Anyway, I'm too interested to see what this article had to say. Anyway, she mentions the Charlie Downs thing, but she also then goes into, in tracking Restore for a few months, I've seen it slither around the edges of, and then gradually imbibe, conspiracy theories about immigrants, people of colour, Muslims and Jews. It's astonishing to think that it is just 2 years since Lowe helped me and others in the Jewish community push back against the ban on Israeli competitors at the World Bowl competition in his Great Yarmouth constituency, and now his party is trading in base anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. What happened to him? Lowe is now at the top of a movement which features some of the nastiest racists in the country. I'm not sure where he stands. Does he control the party or does it control him? Not that it really matters. She then goes into how banning halal and kosher will make it basically impossible for Muslims and Jews to stay here. I'm pretty sure in the Muslim religion there's actually a caveat, and if it's impossible to get halal food, then they're actually exempt. Jews do not have that. Which, by the way, from what I can tell with normies I've talked to, they're sort of more on the side of I'd rather not ban kosher slaughter and have Jews forced to leave because of it. Unironically, that seems to be the popular position, but, you know, anecdote, so don't take my word for it. Anyway, she then mentions Steve Laws, who told Andrew Gold that he's going home, and Sam Mellier, who has joined the party, who was done in 2024 for stirring up racial hatred. I don't think he should have gone to jail for it, really. It was over a graffiti law. Sam Wilkes, a Nazi apologist, and Simon Burkett, who is buying up land for the benefit of the British people, in quotes, because it's a white nationalist site. I know that's not a great way to summarise what he's actually doing, but there you go. But, again, Sam Millier has a poster of Hitler in his garage. Is it fair to call him a neo-Nazi, or is that stochastic terrorism? I don't know, but yeah, these are the people she's brought up, and yet these are people that I think it's fair to say do slither around those racist anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and what have you. I don't think it's an unfair conclusion to take from it all, but again, nobody wants to bring up Steve Law, and you can even tell when, Carl Benjamin or anyone else has to talk about Steve Law, they always just say, well, who cares what he has to say? And it's like, well, he's part of the party and is a big lightning rod for a lot of support for your party, so we actually do have to talk about him and take him seriously. But they keep trying to just poo-poo him, and I think they'd rather he go of his own volition than have to kick him out, because kicking him out means, oh my god, we let Nazis in the party, and now you have a reputation for that. They've run into the same problem Reform did, but they're going down a route of don't kick them out because it makes it look like we don't have a problem. Well, it just makes the problem worse because it looks like you're not taking this problem seriously. And I mean, I'm not being funny. Labour kicked a load of anti-Semites out and they ended up winning an election after, so take from that what you will.
They published an article saying, being Muslim makes you less British, claims Restore co-founder.
I mean, it is clear, obviously the Telegraph are throwing everything out to see what sticks. But there will be enough Telegraph readers who are reading that and thinking, oh, I have a British Muslim friend who I don't particularly want deported. I wonder what Restore would want with him. I mean, yeah, it's cringe and all a bit kumbaya if you're really addicted to the internet, but honestly, it's just obviously one of those things that you need to be a lot careful with your wording over, we'll say. Shockingly, that's been a major point from this channel for quite some time. You obviously have to be careful with how you construct your arguments and what you say. And what do a lot of restorers do? Just throw out everything they can on Twitter to be the edgiest boy possible. Well done. It gets you a fair bit of money, but it doesn't win you any politics or elections, so what's the point?
Yeah. Obviously, we've had to import them. Like, it's not a native faith.
Oh, come on. I'm Catholic, you're Catholic, I'm Irish Catholic. That was imported. Yeah, it's not as alien as Muslim, I get that. But even David Starkey had to say this to your face. How can you complain about any foreign religion when you are literally Catholic and have to make a commitment to Rome? Which is why I don't make that complaint, because I know I'm in the exact same boat and I at least have a modicum of trying to be consistent.
And this is also written by a chap called Patrick Sawyer, who happens to be the same guy who lied about me and wrote a piece accusing me of being an anti-Semite to try and get me banned from Buy Me a Coffee a little while ago.
Yeah, cancel culture bad. But I didn't hear about that one either. I wonder what was said in that. Having a quick read through it, it is actually a bit unfair on Connor Tomlinson, where it brings up the Great Replacement, which is just a phrase I'd never use because of the connotations of it. And he also wanted to ban circumcision, which I just don't care. But Connor Tomlinson's defence of that is that he was quoting Renaud Camus, who was basically using the term the Great Replacement to say that the culture change that's going to come from the Great Replacement, and he doesn't think it's necessarily a shadowy conspiracy to replace white people with non-white, is going to massively negatively affect his Jewish audience he was talking to anyway. So, as I say, Tomlinson is fair to defend himself there. You can't say I'm unfair on the guy. And I will say Connor was one of the last people to be mentioned after, Steve Laws. So, I think it's fairly unfair to lump him in with that lot necessarily. He has said a fair few times he doesn't agree with Steve Laws. Whether he's lying or not, I don't know. But he does at least understand he needs to distance himself.
And he didn't include my response to his request for comment that refuted his entire article.
Oh, that's not true. Yeah, it did. That's how I knew about it. In response to the Telegraph, Mr. Tomlinson rejected criticisms of his viewers as smears, and then goes through the Renaud Camus thing I went through before. So again, that's just wrong, but this was from months ago, so I don't really blame him if he forgot. And to be honest, it's quite usual to not have your reply actually printed, so, I'm not going to begrudge him too much for that.
Now, you would think that, okay, Telegraph thinks you're beyond the pale far right if you think that Muslims aren't British, or they're incompatible with British culture, let's say.
Well, that would depend on the individual, wouldn't it? Is Majid Nawaz not British? Is Zia Yusuf not British? I don't think so.
And it turns out that the majority of public is then far right, according to the Telegraph, as reported by the Telegraph. 53% of the British public think that Islam is incompatible with British values, British culture, British identity.
Yeah, well, I'm not being funny, but these people that I've just cited, you know, they're still Muslims, but they're clearly not on the fundamentalist side of it, are they? Yeah, if you made the country more Islamic, so to speak, it'd be less British. Everyone agrees with that. It's a difference between talking about individuals who are integrating and entire groups and cultures. And the reporting is saying that Charlie Downs said if you are individually a Muslim, you are less British than someone who isn't, which is where the refutation comes in. It's not talking about the group level, which is a slightly different conversation.
And then 4 in 10 think Muslim immigrants have a negative impact on the UK.
So 53% of British anti-Semitic then?
Oh man, got him, Dan. Well done.
I don't know. I actually think probably not, because if you actually break this down in the YouGov data that they're pulling this from, they have a much higher opinion of Jews.
Oh man, maybe you can work out from there why the Telegraph and other righties are so against the implied and sometimes explicit anti-Semitism that's within Restore. Maybe you can work that out.
But if you look at specific...
Yeah, but anti-Semitism is now being anti-Muslim.
Yeah, a bit weird that.
God, what are we, back in 2016? I remember this point being made then. Nobody means that when they say anti-Semitic. They exclusively mean anti-Jewish. That's all it's ever meant. That's why they needed to come up with another word, Islamophobic.
Well, it's one of the most permeable definitions I've ever encountered.
Yeah. I mean, this reminds me of when, after the Bondi Beach shooting, when, you know, again, a Muslim went and shot a bunch of Jews in Australia, Danny Finkelstein said Muslims and Jews need to unite to fight the far right because Nick Fuentes was mean about my mum.
God, he brought up Danny Finkelstein again as well. Again, that was another entire drama that I can't be bothered going through because it's in my last video, where Connor Tomlinson just came out completely embarrassed by the whole thing and he didn't even realise.
Yeah, again, that one left me a bit puzzled as well, to be honest.
I'm going to be honest with you, off the top of my head, I don't even remember this article by Danny Finkelstein or what he said about it, but I will say in the abstract, if you are antagonising two groups of people quite explicitly, you're going to get an enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, so it's not really one that should leave you puzzled, assuming this is what Danny said, I just don't remember.
Yeah, what should puzzle the Telegraph as well is if they're trying to court reform voters away from Restore, they'll be alarmed to hear that according to this polling, YouGov found 87% of reform voters said Muslim immigrants to the UK have an overall negative impact, and 93% said Islam is incompatible with British culture.
I know it's shocking to you, but actually nothing that's been written in any of these articles contests any of that. There's a clear difference between every Muslim must go, which is what people are assuming Mr. Tomlinson and Mr. Downs are implying, and sort of the good ones can stay, the integrated ones can stay model, which is basically all every civic nationalist means. It's just some haven't realised that still means deporting most of them.
I think it's also 71% told Raiku Darling Dame Sarah Khan recently that Muslims can never integrate, and that 55% of the overall British public said diversity is destroying British identity.
Yeah, again, there's no disagreement here, and I don't think the Telegraph are actually refuting any of that. What's going on here is that they are moving to besides the point to try and effectively make themselves feel better and like they're on the right side, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone at the Telegraph who isn't on side with British opinion there. It's just, I guess you don't know what words mean.
So everyone's a far-right anti-Semite, basically in the country, especially in Reform, according to the Telegraph.
Well, that whole thing was about Muslim integration. What part of that had to do with Jews? What are you talking about?
And the reason is, as you're going to touch on in your segment, Israel is the #1 issue for the Telegraph.
Again, as I went through before, it's just not true. There's like a daily podcast on Iran. There's a daily podcast that's gone on for over 1,000 episodes on the Ukraine war. Israel and Gaza doesn't have anywhere close to this coverage. Again, the complaint so far has been about British Jews predominantly. And again, who are the only people that's saying this is Israel? It's the Lotus Munchers, it's Charlie Downs, it's Connor Tomlinson. Again, at no point have they helped themselves here. If anything, they've just proved the point that anything that remotely comes up about Jews, British Jews that is, Israel have to be involved. Which is just mad.
It's the same thing for Spiked. It's the same thing for Richard Tice. I think, you know, Britain and our demographic security and our ability to have our own country, a bit like, you know, Jews enjoy in Israel, which you support.
Christ alive, it's just... If I was going to teach anyone how not to do optics, I think I'd just play this whole video.
Is actually the main issue. But Alistair Heath has shared this piece, angry that Charlie Downs used the term genocide for Israel's war with Gaza. Now, you can dispute that if you like.
So what on God's green earth is your problem then? Oh, you can dispute that, there's nothing wrong with that. What's your complaint got to be? Because again, that is partaking in stochastic terrorism. Like, part of the reason that some Jews have been stabbed and ambulances have been set on fire is because they have been called genocide enablers. Do you not understand this? Oh, it's Muslims doing it, though. Yeah, I know. As I said before, Anne Widdecombe didn't die at the hands of a Labour member, did she?
Though I would raise the point that if you're going to challenge that, ministers like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir's rhetoric has not been particularly helpful to refute the accusations of genocidal intent.
Goodness me, the Telegraph have a breadth of opinion. Oh no. Is this anything to do with what Alistair Heath said? No. Therefore it's pointless to listen to.
You can quibble about civilian casualties.
I saw the tweet you were referring to. That was somewhat alarming, and by somewhat I mean extremely.
It's not just one.
He's the guy who said basically all Lebanon must burn.
Yeah, he wants to see
Even
Lebanese mothers crying over their children. Yeah.
I guess welcome to the realities of war. That's the sort of thing you got to bear in mind. These people are at war, and they are going to say crazy things. Similar things were said and even done during World War II when we had an existential threat from Nazi Germany. Like, is it overly harsh, and would I recommend against it? Yes. Do I blame a man who, this whole thing has been set off and had ongoing casualty among other types of heinous acts? Obviously. But, some other guy said something that was genocidal language, okay? Doesn't mean Israel are partaking in a genocide. It doesn't even mean Alistair Heath's on board with that, and you've not shown he is, so what's the point?
Yeah, and then Smotrich has repeatedly said that we are going to expand well beyond the borders of Gaza, go into Lebanon, do the Greater Israel Project, and it's okay, that would cause widespread displacement.
Also,
we're way off topic at this point. We're talking about Israel way more than I thought we would again, so can we just move on to another point that's actually about the topic at hand, please?
This is the point made basically by Stephen Pollard, who was, by the way, the former research director of the Fabian Society, so I don't know why we're talking to him. In this piece, he says, Hitler first wrote about the big lie in Mein Kampf, the idea that ordinary people are more likely to fall for huge, outrageous lies than a small, subtle one. The genocide lie, perpetuated by Charlie Downs, is a typical example of this. Okay, he's Hitler.
That's just not what he said. Can you not read? Hitler explains that if you have a big, bombastic lie, people are more likely to believe it than a small, subtle one. And so they're telling a big bombastic lie. The fact that came from Mein Kampf is sort of almost irrelevant to the actual point being made.
The thing is, we're not talking about Israel or Gaza. You guys are forcing us to talk about this because you keep saying
we're skipping over this because it's just wrong. This is all stemming from Charlie Downs' own points being made about the Gaza genocide in quotes. So no, this is Charlie Downs bringing it up and everyone else reacting to it. Actually,
no, we want to talk about Britain.
Yep, same thing happened this morning. Gideon Falter, Britain's Jews a right to fear the rise of Restore.
Sorry, but again, I don't know why I have to keep explaining this. British Jews and Israel are two separate things. There's overlap. There are British Jews who are also Israeli citizens, say. But again, as much as there is a lot of pro-Israel opinion in the Telegraph on the centre-right, even on the slightly further right than that, to be honest, saying I'm a little bit worried about British Jews is not necessarily bringing up Israel. The only reason that there's a lot of overlap at the moment is because of the whole Gaza war thing. So sorry, no. I'm not accepting this, we just want to talk about Britain. This whole thing has been a defence of Downs bringing up Israel. Sorry, you're at fault here.
Literally, deathly silent on Muslims killing Jews.
Okay, it's just not true. Do you not think they report the stabbings? Do you not think they are on board with the deportation of these types of criminals, of these types of people? Do you think they're considered integrated by the Telegraph? Let's be sensible.
Charlie Downs has just said some things he didn't like on the internet. Meanwhile, Jihad al-Shami, goes and attacks a Manchester synagogue. He said,
okay, you're not allowed to talk about Restore and the things that they say because Muslims have stabbed Jews in the past. What sort of defence is this? They're not refuting anything that's actually said, by the way. They're not actually refuting any of this anymore. They're just saying, why are you talking about this? They're complaining that a magnifying glass has been put over them. They're not saying that what they found is wrong.
The pincer movement now threatens British politics as the far left and Islamists attack from one direction.
Oh, he did it. He just brought up Islamists. He just brought up Islamists. Are you not going to say thank you for that? Are you not going to point out, they do bring it up? No, you're not, because you're a dishonest twink.
Restore Britain appears to be its mirror image, right? So they want to basically criminalise the far left activist groups that are importing said Muslim terrorists and calling for violence and deport said Muslim terrorists. And apparently they're the mirror image in this horseshoe.
Well, on a rhetorical level, which is obviously what he's referring to, I can see why he said that. He's not saying that Restore Britain is as bad as Islamists, because you're obviously not, because, yeah, you've not killed anyone. Well done.
Bit strange. Heath has been sharing all of these, of course. There's Britain's Jews a right to fear the rise of Restore. And here's one. We are witnessing the emergence of a 21st century British fascism. Written by Jake Wallace-Simons, who recently said that ICE was basically like Adolf Hitler in America, so he doesn't think deportation should be done there either.
I just had a quick read through the article to see what he actually said. He's not against deportations, he's just against ICE becoming a sort of untouchable, uncriticisable institution, especially while it's shooting civilians and, you know... Not to bring up these old wounds, but I still think that second shooting was the most unjustified thing I've seen in some time in America. And effectively, that there is two criticisms. Like, obviously there needs to be open investigations into mistakes that ICE are making, and having a cult of personality around Trump, which means that you can't have anything close to an investigation, is probably bad for the long-term prospects of America. At no point does he say deportation shouldn't happen.
And the photo is protesters calling to jail Oswald Mosley, with the insinuation, of course, being that Rupert Lowe, Charlie Downs and the like should be in prison.
Well, that's one interpretation. If you actually read the article, I guess we'll find out.
Apparently as well, I'm raising this because at time of recording, Jake Wallace-Simons has been DMing me over X, asking for comment for a piece he's writing tomorrow, yet again about anti-Semitism and immigration.
Damn crazy. The Telegraph really hate anti-Semitism. I'm not shocked at that at all.
So they're doing more. They're still in the works. This is not stopping. It's absolutely absurd.
No, this was all entirely predictable, and I was telling a lot of people who are quite new to this online politics thing that this is exactly what would happen. I said this when Restore launches the party. You'll get a load of stuff like this. They'll save up a whole portfolio and go for the neck, and it's likely going to cause a massive crisis in your party, and it could even kill it. Because there's no way they're ready for this. And really their only defence of it is, oh, look at all these hit pieces, we must be doing something right. And that only works for so many people for so long.
And the reason I wanted to raise this one is because he says, Lowe's 25-year-old sidekick distinguished himself by calling Alistair Heath, the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, a traitor for suggesting Restore as a racism problem.
I mean, yeah, it's a pretty incredible reply, to be honest with you. But this is all they're trying to work on. Like, just say Chad yes and you'll be fine. It's like, sorry, you need to be a little bit better than that.
As in traitor to the nation, and I'm going to have to pronounce German words here, so bear with me, Volksverräter, or a race traitor, Rassenschande. You get where I'm going with this. Yes, of course. I get where you're going with this. He's a Nazi. You just translated it straight into German. It sounds scary, right?
Yeah, but again, you can't just keep saying Chad yes to all this and expect it to be okay. You'll have like a core few thousand activists, and the most votes you'll get are of people who don't really pay attention, are just like, mass deportation sounds alright, and then you basically hope that they vote for you instead of reform. But ultimately, what's going to damage this most is probably Rupert Lowe of all people. I mean, with all this going on under him, there will be constant questions asked of him of, well, how are you dealing with this? And when apparently it's been asked to him privately, basically goes off the handlebars. So there's no long-term solution even being thought up by this. They're just hoping for the best that it can all blow over, but, well, it's not going to, is it? This isn't the first time they've been accused of anti-Semitism and white nationalism, and it's going to likely stick because there's a fair amount of receipts for all this stuff, and the response is incredibly lacklustre.
He says, Downes' previous insistence that Britain is a people defined by indigenous British ancestry and Christian faith. All that was missing was the blood and soil, Blut and Boden rhetoric.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that's the ankle he was flashing. That's been talked about for months, and many people who paid attention noticed well in advance. And as I say, even Tim Stanley was saying, we've known about this stuff for ages, it's just when do we all report on it? Well, I guess when it's silly summer and they're showing weakness, that's our answer. I mean, again, it's just, oh, they're calling us Hitlers because they're completely out of arguments, when in reality it's, well, there are some comparisons to be made.
Yeah, because I get it, he's German, he's a Nazi, right? Now do Hebrew. Because you are a blood and soil nationalist for Israel.
Israel allows Jewish converts and allows non-ethnic Jews, I guess you'd call them. So no, not quite, I'm afraid.
Yes.
That's basically fine. I don't care. That's your prerogative, right? Fair enough. I just want the same standard, okay? I'm not even using the terms blood and soil.
Neither did the guy you're accusing of being a blood and soil nationalist for Israel, which again isn't even true. So, you know, this is all just turning into tit for tat stuff. I mean, it's Chad Yes stuff of now do Hebrew. It's just This is why I said to Alex on Twitter publicly, like, you get a lot further calling these people weirdos than misogynists or racists or anti-Semites or whatever. Just call them weirdos, because they are. They're really weird people. They're incapable of getting on with anyone outside their bubble. With the rare exception of Carl Benjamin, who seems to understand to make your way in the world, you actually have to feign sincerity.
But if someone were to write this in Haaretz, it wouldn't get the accusations of anti-Semitism and Nazism, would it?
Well, it'd be quite difficult to call something written in Haaretz anti-Semitic, but, you know. For those of you who don't know, Haaretz, I had to Google this, by the way, just so you know, is the Israeli news paper, so there you go. Quite funny, he knows that off the top of his head, I will be honest with you, but there we go.
Melanie Phillips has been doing this morning, but, I mean, yet again, this is her stock and trade. She thinks, you know, Israel is a nation for Jews, Britain must be a nation of values. I'm not even going to read her article.
I like how he's saying that as if he properly read any of the others, but anyway. Melanie Phillips is definitely one that I, you know, can agree on is a bit of a double standard with it. But either way, when you actually find out how Israel's citizenship works, it's not a million miles away from the ideal way in which British citizenship works. Just the main difference is obviously you don't have to convert to a religion, and if you want that religion to be Christianity, you're way off, because most Brits aren't even Christian these days, so that would be pointless. Which is why we have to find this British values type thing, because at the end of the day, if you convert to a religion, you are converting to its values, aren't you? So that's where the similarities come in. It's just not as obviously hardline and written in scripture or the word of God, which makes it all a hell of a lot more complicated. But that doesn't mean it's not a noble effort.
It's just tiresome by this point. But what we're seeing is the intractable blockage of Israel gets to be a country for Jewish people, you don't get to have a country, you anti-Semite. Which
is just not what's happening. It's just not what's happening at all. I mean, I'm not particularly shocked Stelios has said basically nothing this entire time, because I wouldn't be shocked if his mind is just going to, this is a waste of half an hour and not even true.
Why is that? Let me just finish. This guy, Matthias Dopfner, who runs Axel Springer, just bought the Telegraph. Now, of course, some of these writers were already on staff, and these were their organic opinions.
What's the point of even bringing up it's got new ownership if you're just going to say, yeah, this will have made no difference anyway, by the way? What are you doing? In fact, I remember a while ago, Alistair Heath was on the Daily Tea talking about Restore and how he had already noticed how they had this string of anti-Semitism and people who are rather on the racist side of the aisle. And as I say, all that's really happened is they've kept this portfolio and decided to blast it all out now. Again, because you've shown weakness with the, we're going to need a pact, aren't we, thing. Again, I don't think any of them realise how weak that made them look.
But this seems to have been kicked up a gear since he acquired the Telegraph. Paul Marshall was also in the bidding for it, who owns ARC and GB News and Spectator, Unheard, few other things as well.
Welcome to vast media empires, I guess. You know, it's Murdoch as well who owns a whole load of papers and news outlets. The illusion of choice, as many people put it.
But he got outbid by this guy. And this guy owns Politico, is a German progressive, which means that he is one of the most self-hating breeds of European on the planet.
Again, the way Connor's been talking about people, I'd take that with a pinch of salt. I've no idea if it's true or not. I don't really care. He's sort of gone off topic now. I might end this video early. We are 2 hours in. Oh, there's only 2 minutes left of the segment. Let's just do it.
And he sat down with my old nemesis, Freddie Sayers, and said that his purpose is to turn the Telegraph into an institution to defend the, quote, open society with a zero tolerance for anti-Semitism.
Well, it's not that open then, but yeah, German progressive really doesn't like anti-Semitism. Shocked and appalled. And again, if his reaction is basically what Alistair Heath has been saying for months anyway, I don't really have a problem with it. It still seems that the Times is to the left of this position. Just saying.
What, Karl Popper's Open Society?
Yes. Yes. That's also what Alistair Heath said in the previous piece as well. He said he is committed to the open society.
More specifically here, his interpretation of an open identity is one with high barriers to entry, where the requirements are actually much tougher than the status quo, and that to him is obvious, and it would not rely on self-identification, which already, yeah, good, fine with me, and the numbers should be closely limited, again, good. Membership should not be predicated on race or religion, all sounds fine to me. So, again, the implication that he's an open borders moron who wants absolutely everyone in the planet to have British passports is just wrong. That's just not true. But they don't care how much they misrepresent their enemies because they think they're being misrepresented, which, as I say, sorry, they've got too many receipts for me to agree with you.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look into what those guys actually believed, it is the dismantlement of Europe.
Well, maybe they shouldn't say open society then, but that doesn't appear to be what the Telegraph are saying when they mean open society. Well, I agree, it sounds really cringe, but it's clearly not the same as what appears to be implied by saying open society.
What led to the abolition of firm boundaries around borders, identities, families, culture, the abolition of national preference. It's very well laid out in R.R. Eno's Return of the Strong Gods, a book that you guys done a book club on before.
Go on then, explain it. This will be good.
And it's very conspicuous that Axel Springer says all this. So Axel Springer...
Oh, he just says it's laid out in this book you should read. Well, I'm not going to read it, so you need to summarise it for me. But they didn't.
Matthias Dopfner, CEO of Axel Springer, did a speech at the World Jewish Congress in May. And they...
Christ alive, for people who say they don't want to talk about Israel and Jews so much, they're bringing up a lot of Jews and Israelis. Goodness me.
Quote him in here, and he says something which sounds actually reasonable until you sort of recontextualize it. He says, okay, it's not Zionism that's racism, rather anti-Zionism is racism. Fine, whatever, that's what Richard Tice said. That's a line that they're all saying, whatever.
Oh yeah, it's because it's a line that makes sense, but anyway.
But he says, what does not make sense to me is this. Why should Zionism be an idea and a goal that only Jews can embrace? He continued, I am a Zionist. I mean, I think that's totally fair.
Okay, in fact, can we get to the good bit now? I have no idea where this is going. I don't know what this possibly could be a setup for. I feel like I'm reading a Guardian article on like where you're going and the maddest thing ever is said.
But he means, why should only Jews support Zionism? Non-Jews should support Zionism. I would prefer to say, why should Zionism for your own people be an idea that only Jews can embrace? I would like the same for Britain.
What do you think nationalism is? Zionism is just a very specific form of nationalism for Israel. It's literally a nationalist movement. That's all Zionism is. So yeah, other people can be nationalists for their own country. You're actually allowed to do that. You're just, one, really bad at promoting it, and two, for some reason have this obsession with Israel. Like, they say they don't want to talk about it, and they've just brought it up again for no reason. He didn't have to bring this up, and it's like, I don't want to talk about this, but oh god, look, here's a guy saying Zionism. What are we doing?
And I wanted to finish this just because, I don't know if you notice, but that's not a full quote. They say, why should Zionism be an idea and a goal that only Jews can embrace? End speech marks. He continued, I am a Zionist. They missed out a bit there. I just want to play this.
Is this going to be one of those things that they interpret really badly? Where are we going with this? Like, literally, I have no idea what context could be added here to make this bad. Like, I have no idea what to predict here. This is odd.
It is not Zionism that is racism. It is anti-Zionism that is racism. Zionism is the most natural response to thousands of years of persecution, expulsion, and genocide. What does not make sense to me is this. Why should Zionism be an idea and a goal that only Jews can embrace? I'm a Goy, and I'm a Zionist. With all my heart, out of conviction, and with passion.
Yeah, Goy is the derogatory one.
That was it? You just wanted to hear him say Goy? What? We've gone completely off-piste here. Like, seriously, again, the title of this entire section was called This Is Just Shameless at this point, and was about, can we please stop being called anti-Semitic? And then how do they end it? Yeah, I just want to show you this guy who says, like, Zionism makes sense, I'm not Jewish, I said Goy, but I'm a Zionist. It's like, okay, what are we doing? What's the point here? Like, I know I'll probably get a few people in comments saying, why don't you let them finish points? Because it's really funny to speculate on what's going to be said next, because honestly, I'm so glad I did these last 2 minutes, because I've got another 10 minutes of just going, wow, you really are a weirdo, Connor. Like, what is this?
You could have said Gentile. Why did you feel the need to call yourself a Goy and a Zionist? And why did as well the World Jewish Congress not quote that bit? That's a bit weird, isn't it?
Because as you say, it didn't add anything. He already called himself a Gentile. And I don't know, I've written articles before where I don't have the full quote and split it too. It's just an irrelevant thing to add. And yeah, maybe the guy doesn't understand it's derogatory, and they did, so they're like, just leave that bit out. Doesn't take anything away, doesn't add anything. Like, again, what's the point?
Well, because it's better signalling, that's why.
I agree with him that nationalism, essentially, taking your own side, having a country for your own people.
Right, that's just everything I said before, fine. Again, what was the point of the Goy bit? I still don't understand why he added that in. I think he wanted a laugh, but couldn't land the joke. I think that's it.
Demographic security is actually the appropriate response to genocide, expulsions, years of mistreatment, and becoming a minority displaced from your own homeland. If that's the case for Jews, I want the same for me. But because the Telegraph doesn't think so, you can cancel your Telegraph subscription with a helpful page on their website, or you can call the phone number that they link to. And I advise that you do and pick up a copy of Islander and Extend.
Don't do that. Islander's just a glorified substock of really, really boring people. You will actually learn things from the Telegraph, and it's not all just attack piece on Restore Britain, believe it or not. I do enjoy how they complain about pieces made by various journalists saying, oh my god, they're trying to ruin my livelihood. And now they're here saying you should stop your subscription, after they've told numerous lies about the Telegraph there, by the way. So, you know, as I say, the alternative media has just turned into a worse version of the mainstream media, to be quite honest with you. So, there you go. I mean, my actual take is give whoever you want money. I don't really care. But basically, the only publication I give money to is The Spectator, and even that I'm iffy on sometimes. But, you know, that's just personal preference. But I will say, The Times and The Telegraph both do better podcasts than the Lotus Eaters. So, there you go. No offence, Stelios. You're a good one. But Stelios, man, you got to start pointing out these inconsistencies, because this is just awful to listen to. So there we have it. We made it through a half-hour segment in 2 hours and 13 minutes. I'm tired, man. I know you all enjoy this, and I know this wasn't as high energy as some of my other videos, but my goodness, man. It's difficult to get through a whole piece like that, but this was suggested by me by a few people, because it is clearly just Connor Tomlinson having a cope and seethe half hour, and it's very funny to watch that. And I think it's a decent sequel to my Christmas video, so there you go. Right, with all that, Connor Tomlinson must be blacklisted. Next Wednesday I'll be playing some more Silksong. Next Saturday I'll be doing Laughing at the Guardian, and we will actually be going through Guardian articles that time round. God knows when I'm going to do another Lotus Eaters video, but I know a lot of people do quite like them, but I really do have to start limiting myself on them, because I think they're worse for my sanity than the Guardian. But videos out is when I can make them anyway. If you enjoy what I do, please do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and of course, share the video with anyone you think interested. And beyond that, please do leave a super chat, leave super thanks, and become a channel member. Right, with that, thank you all very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.